the last 2 years, and those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit, but actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies. Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and good morning to you. Merry Christmas Eve, one and all. I hope you're feeling better than I am right now. Wretched, that's what I am. But we're going to survive the next 3 hours together and get through all of the headlines. And I'm going to see if I can bring a bit of Christmas cheer, which feels like pushing water up a mountain today. The news headlines are pretty grim, as they always are, and I am too. But let's not be a Grinch. Let's try and hang some baubles and some tinsel in dark and unreached places and shine a little light of hope in readiness for what I expect to be a better 2026, because frankly 2025 sucks, didn't it? Maybe it didn't for you. I hope it was the best year of your life. Right, if you want to get in touch and cheer a girl up who is definitely circling the plug hole, then give me a call. 0344 499 1000. That's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. If you'd rather send a text message, the number number is 87222. Remember to write the word talk before you text. That way it doesn't get lost, getting ensnared in the vapour trails from Santa's sleigh as he delivers goodies around the world and finds its way into this little Cape Canaveral I have in front of me. We're on X at talkTV. OK, let's get on, shall we? My first guest today is Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons and former Conservative MP for the Ribble Valley. Good morning to you, Nigel.
Good morning, Alex, and welcome to the Ribble Valley. I've got to tell you this story. This morning I was having a chat with the neighbours.
Yeah.
And some flowers arrived, and the flower driver said to me, "So when are you next on talk?" So we've got to give a big hello to the Clitheroe Flower Shop at Wellgate in the Ribble Valley.
Hey, hello, Clitheroe Flower Shop, and thank you if you're tuning in. I love the fact that they're sort of waiting for you to pop up on talk, as do we all, me included, can I just say. We like the fact you're so erudite and learned and measured, and a very decent man to boot as well, unlike some might say, our Prime Minister. I mean, this story is tragic. I'm relieved, frankly, that they've done a U-turn on the inheritance tax. About time too, long overdue. But people have already had to take desperate measures in order to dodge what, to me, was never going to make much money for the Exchequer, was totally unnecessary, ill-conceived, badly thought through. And my big question is this. This U-turn appears to have come after Tom Bradshaw, the president of the NFU, said he had met with Starmer and had a detailed conversation about the human consequences of this policy. Well, why is it, right, when they pushed this policy out, there had been no impact assessment. This meeting hadn't already taken place. They didn't listen to the NFU when they were giving their statistics on quite how many people would be impacted by this, nor did they particularly listen to Whitehall's own workings, and decided they were going to blindly, willfully do it anyway.
Yeah, and no mention of it in the election manifesto of 2024. And in fact, quite the reverse. They were quite happy to cozy up to the farmers and pretend that they were going to look after them. Listen, the Ribble Valley, my old seat here, has got over 800 farms. Thanks to them that they provide the food that people will be eating today. And of course, a lot of Christmas lunches will be thanks to British farmers and also the countryside. Just think about the management of the countryside and the tourism that it brings in its wake. The Ribble Valley has hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. They come to look at the incredible area of outstanding natural beauty, which is populated by farmers. And the government couldn't have got it more wrong. You quite rightly say, Alex, that it wasn't going to raise all that much money. And indeed, the U-turn itself is still going to leave an inheritance tax take for farmers of £300 million. So it's a U-turn, but it's only a partial U-turn. And still, there are going to be a lot of farmers out there that are going to be concerned. No doubt they'll be sitting down with their accountants, trying to work out what the heck that they can do to try and protect their farms for future generations. And that's only if they can persuade future generations to come into farming in the first place. It really is one of the most crass, ill-judged policies that this government has brought forward. And as you know, that's a pretty high bar.
Well, it is indeed, isn't it? Let's talk about this deeply alarming story. I mean, it's both deeply alarming and on some level reassuring, which is two ISIS-inspired terrorists who are found guilty of plotting the worst terrorist attack in British history have been caught in an undercover sting. I say it's reassuring because it seems to me we've got very robust and good defences in the form of our police and our intelligence agencies. But what is alarming is, no doubt, this pair who are able to get rifles, handguns, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, who wanted to go out and kill as many Jews as possible, they're not going to be the only ones. And I dread to think how many people we have who are both born and raised here, but also people who have come into the country illegally, who are planning something similar, because I've done a lot of research into this matter on what is called OSINT, open source intelligence, and I speak to a lot of people in intelligence agencies in Israel, in America, and here at home. And the message has been clear from the start, which is there is going to be what is called a mass casualty event at some point It is not a matter of when, if, it is more a matter of when. All we've got, really, to help us is intervention, and one hopes that we can intercept every single plot to murder as many people as possible, but it only takes one to slip through the net, and that is, you know, potentially tens of lives that could be lost.
Yeah, it reminds me of the saying, if you recall, post the Brighton bombing, when there was an assassination attempt at the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. 5 people did get killed. A lot of other people sustained injuries, lifetime injuries. And the IRA said, Margaret Thatcher has to be lucky every time. We only need to be lucky once. Absolutely chilling. Yeah, these people were absolutely radicalized, and they lived only several miles away from the Ribble Valley in Lancashire. And don't forget, it was only a few weeks ago that 2 people were murdered in cold blood outside a synagogue in Manchester. Yeah, 3 cheers for the undercover sting operation, which has prevented what could have been the biggest tragedy in British history. That's what the police have said. And I think that we have to be grateful for their actions. And let's just, you know, hope that they can redouble on that, because, as you say, just one, they only have to be lucky once. And it makes you think, doesn't it, that if you've got these 2 in Wigan and Bolton, not far from here, and they were planning this meticulously, buying arms. They were actually selling a house, moving homes, taking money out of bank accounts to buy weapons and ammunition. It is absolutely frightening. And if that was happening here, you know, it could be happening in lots of other places as well. So 3 cheers to the undercover sting operation for doing that. And of course, this is at exactly the same time, Alex, as I'm reading that, of course, Bob Vylan, the police have said he's not going to face any charges whatsoever for his chance of death to the IDF during Glastonbury. Absolutely, it's mind-boggling. And, you know, the police have really got to look again at ensuring that the hate crimes, which involve people who hate Jewish people simply for being Jewish, and it's not just that they hate them, they want them dead. They want them dead from the river to the sea. I think it's absolutely appalling.
What do we need to do, Nigel, at this point? Because, you know, the thing that concerns me the most is we have got radicalised people within our communities, and yet I don't know what steps we're taking to make sure mosques are being monitored and radical preachers are being expelled from our society. And I don't understand as well why we haven't yet pulled the emergency lever when it comes to illegal immigration into this country, because without doubt of these tens of thousands now in 1 year of undocumented men coming from terror hotspots, even 1% of the 44,000 that have come into the country so far this year would represent a pretty extraordinary number of potential terrorists. And we know as well that the people traffickers, in part, could be working with terrorist organisations. This is how organisations such as Al-Qaeda like to make their money these days, because it's far more profitable than the opium trade. And yet the government just seems to wave them through, put them in army barracks now. What I don't understand is, why aren't they monitored? If you're going to stick them in army barracks, which have natural perimeter fences, great, let that be as far as these people can go. Don't enable them to live the life of Riley. They're going missing at the rate of about 1 a day from various hotels. Don't stick them in HMOs where they could be, I don't know, making bomb vests at the kitchen counter. It is beyond lackadaisical. It is willfully dangerous. And I am petrified of what lies in wait. What would you say the government should be doing at this point, given that without a doubt we are facing a significant terror threat?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to say that the vast majority of Muslims in our community, those who are either come in or have been born here, are 1,000% on the side of what you have just said. They are horrified too at what has been perpetrated in Manchester, in Bondi Beach and various other places around the world. I went to a bar mitzvah a couple of years ago, and I remember being told by somebody in the synagogue that they have to train people in order to ensure the security of those who are in synagogues praying. Can you imagine that? You know, when I go to church, Church of England, you don't get any of that. There's nobody standing outside to ensure the security and safety of people that are already in there. So Jews are absolutely persecuted and targeted group in the United Kingdom and throughout the world. Now, going on to the separate bit about the undocumented people that are coming in and are going missing on an incredibly regular rate, then of course my own view on this is, and it's not just terrorism, it is also illegal immigration. It is also the fact that it's been reported that 40,000 of them will be in hotels this Christmas, all paid for by the British taxpayer. They entered illegally. My own view is that when they come in, they need to be properly DNA, they need to be fingerprinted, they need to be tagged, and then they need to be sent to third countries in order to be processed, and they need to be found guilty of the crime of illegally entering the United Kingdom. It's as simple as that. You come in illegally on a small boat, you're already guilty of the crime of entering the United Kingdom illegally, and you will be sent abroad to be processed, and you will be banned for life from ever legally entering the United Kingdom ever again. As we know, even when we send some of these people away on that stupid one-in, one-out scheme that seems to be crumbling, Alex, it's almost like it's a merry-go-round, because you send them one way and then back in they come. We've already got instances of people who have been sent abroad. They've been deported and they come straight back in.
We are definitely facing the battle, I think, of a generation when it comes to this topic. Let's talk about Kemi Badenoch now, because she's having a bit of a festive run, isn't she? There's been a bit of a push behind her lately, some fair trade wins, let's say. She's having a blinder in PMQs, some people might say, although I do feel like this current government gives her very much an open goal in which to sort of smash one in the back of the net. But she's done a big interview today in The Sun, a very broad-ranging interview. Do you think that she's sort of going to enter the next year on the front foot? Because she took a long time when she first became Conservative leader to establish herself, to lay out what her sort of ideology was, to enable the voters to get to know her. Do you think now she's sort of got that sorted, she's going to start be able to making some gains?
Yeah, I was concerned by the fact that she took about a year to review where things had gone wrong and how we were going to address them. And I think the critical point came at the Tory party conference in October, when we were all looking to see how she was going to present herself. And if she tripped up there, then, of course, there are others waiting in the wings in the Tory party ready to take over. And it seemed to me that that speech that she gave was an absolute cracker. She started to address the issues where we know things have gone wrong as far as illegal immigration. And then she turned on things like stamp duty on houses and stuff like that. And she gave a raft of policies that seemed to be incredibly popular. And at the same time then, as you say, she was going to the dispatch box at the House of Commons, gladiatorial atmosphere. It's a theatre where, you know, basically it's a blood sport. And she started to improve. Why? Because she became more confident. And as she became more confident, the people sitting behind her became more confident too. Do you know the old adage in British politics, Alex, is that the opposition sits in front of you, the enemy sits behind. If you get them wrong, your own people, then you really have got trouble. But my goodness me, she is growing in confidence every time that I see her. And I think that she is absolutely going to be on the front foot. This, at the same time, don't forget, as the Labour Party is plummeting in the polls. The latest opinion poll incredibly puts them in fourth position behind the Conservatives, Reform, and even the Green Party. It is something quite spectacular, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons why we have seen the latest U-turn on the farm inheritance tax policy, because a number of Labour MPs refused to support the policy the other day when it came before Parliament. And they told Jonathan Reynolds, their chief whip, that they were going to absolutely put an amendment down that would try and wreck that particular policy. So Starmer seems to be on the back foot. They're plummeting in the polls. One poll put them as low as 14%, which is just quite incredible. We've got to remember as well, Alex, that at the last general election, they only got 33.7% of the vote anyway. So they may have a stupendous majority in Westminster. They've got a majority, but they do not have a mandate for the policies that they are bringing forward, which are really making people feel incredibly miserable. And
yeah, indeed, you're right. Just quickly, before I let you go, who would make the better Prime Minister, Nigel Farage or Kemi Badenoch?
Oh, absolutely, Kemi. Absolutely. I knew her when I was a member of Parliament, and I've chatted to her. Me and her were on the 1922 committee together. We used to have our little chats, and I thought, my goodness me, you've got blue blood running through your veins. She is absolutely Margaret Thatcher in the making. She's very steely. She's a Tory. She's a true Conservative, and she will absolutely deliver given the opportunity. And I hope that the Tory party, which were very nervous last year, are now going to rally behind her and make sure that she gets that opportunity to take on, whether it'll be Keir Starmer or Wes Streeting or Angela Rayner. I mean, my goodness me. I mean, the big question mark around the Christmas dinner table tomorrow is going to be, who's the biggest turkey, the one we're eating or the one in number 10 Downing Street?
Well, indeed, yeah. I'm sure he probably is eyeing up next year, thinking I'd rather not be in number 10 anyway. Nigel, thank you ever so much. It's always lovely catching up. You have a very Merry Christmas up in the Ribble Valley. OK, we're going to take a break now, but I'd love to hear from you because we're doing calls after this. And by the sound of my voice, you know that I'm going to need your help in filling the airtime today. So it's your normal network rate, which means you're not paying for anything, to give a bit of charity to little Alex today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. You can also send me a WhatsApp on that number, leave me a voice note on WhatsApp on that number, or if you'd rather send a text, it's 87222. I'll speak to some of you in just a moment.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, I bet you've all been sitting at home tenterhooks, waiting for the Christmas message from number 10 Downing Street. Did you even know there was going to be one? Well, there has been. Shall we have a little watch?
I'd like to wish the whole country a very happy Christmas. Right now, all across the UK, people are travelling home to be with their loved ones. Children are bursting with excitement. Families are making the final preparations, wrapping presents, hanging stockings, rushing out for last-minute bits. It's a truly special time of year. And it's a time to remind ourselves what's really important. Family, friends, community. It's a time to celebrate the Christmas story and to cherish the Christian values that define it. Peace, charity and goodwill to all. That is the promise of the season. And just as so many put their feet up, some truly special people will be pulling on their uniforms and heading out to work. Our NHS staff, emergency services, and the brave men and women of our armed forces.
Wow, he sounds like he's got more congestion than I have. Keir Starmer there, talking about family and community. That's pretty much just nicking the lines from Reform UK, isn't it? And banging on about Christian values. What do we make of that? Should we speak to a caller now? Let's get Dan in Portsmouth on the line. Hello, good morning to you, Dan.
Hello, mate. I saw that you're feeling not feeling so good. I wasn't ringing about the Keir Starmer message, although that's a lot to unpick in there. I just wondered about your last guest, really. You know, it's very reassuring when these guys and girls come on your shows and other shows saying how horrified the Muslim community are at anti-Semitism and all the anti-Israel rhetoric and the terrorist attacks. It's really reassuring, and I'm pleased that they feel that way. I'd love to know where he gets his evidence from. I'd love to know. They always say it, but they never say. And the reason I know this is, I was at a meeting yesterday with all these imams and elders, and they're all up in arms, and they want everyone to know how reassured but they can feel. You never see any evidence. You never see any of them coming out. You never see any of them making statements. So where do they get their evidence from? They can't just keep making these statements.
I think, you actually raised an important point. We can't just pay lip service to things to sound polite, to sound balanced, so we don't cause offence. But what I would say in terms of evidencing it is we've got a population of around, is it 5 million Muslims? And if the majority of them weren't peaceniks, we would definitely know about it by now. So I think that evidence is enough. And I'm sure in your own life you must know people who practice that faith in your friendship group.
Yeah, do I get to? Well, yeah, I agree with you, but no, I disagree with that answer. There's a lot of things I am very, very for, but I don't do them because I'm peaceful and law-abiding, right? But I still think them. I still think, yeah, go on, mate. We all live within the constraints of society. So, no, I disagree. There could be millions of Muslims out there that think, yeah, I totally agree with that, like they did with the Charlie Hebdo attack. They did a survey, and something like 40% had absolute sympathy with the attackers at Charlie Hebdo. So I'm afraid I disagree with that point. They just don't enact upon it. Doesn't mean they're not horrified. They just don't enact upon it.
If that's the case and 40% were sort of supportive of that attack, then it still means the majority were not, doesn't it?
That's a lot. Yeah, but that's a very difficult argument you're making there, and I think you know it. No, they weren't supportive of it. I didn't say that. I said they weren't horrified by it. They were.
Well, then, if you say 40% weren't horrified, it suggests that 60% were horrified, which is 2/3.
Well, that's not the vast majority, then, is it?
Well, 2/3 is getting up to a significant majority, yeah. The thing is, though, look, I think you make an important point, which is, what might help is if we saw, do we have a chief imam like we've got a chief rabbi? I don't know. Why don't they come out and say things at critical moments? It does sort of pose significant questions, and we know that we have within our midst, within our communities, we do have radicals, we do have Islamists, we know that for sure. And I often think that the best way and it would help the Muslim communities as well, is to tackle this stuff head on, to weed them out, to shame them, to name them, to expel them. And therefore, we might begin to feel, because when you look at other countries, do you ever go on holiday to places like, Morocco, the UAE, Egypt?
I've worked in these countries all my life.
Oh, you're gone. The gremlins have got into the phone lines there, Dan, unfortunately. I was really enthusiastic about hearing that answer. But that's what I would say. I'm someone who's holidayed a lot in Morocco. And I remember it was sort of 2000 and 2008, something like that. There was a significant terror attack in Jamal Fnar, the main square in Marrakesh. But that's the last one that I can remember in Morocco. And it's interesting, the government's given us travel advisory guidelines about the risk of potential terrorism over in the UAE. But think of how many expats live there. That is a Muslim nation who have worked very hard to try and expel terrorism, extremism, and the Muslim Brotherhood. We know that terrorists and extremists exist. I think in this country we're so worried about offending the sort of peaceful majority that we actually give too much rope to people who are deeply unpleasant. We need to have the spine to stand up for our values and be extremely strict on those who do not wish to integrate and those that do not share our values. I've said for a long time, I mean, the government's missed a trick when it comes to non-stun slaughter. If they're on the side of animals, that should have been on the list, regardless of who they think it's going to offend, because the religion of this nation is Christianity. You know, so Keir Starmer's just put out that message, hasn't he? It's Christmas time, Christian values. It is our state religion, okay? It would do him good to remember that and promote it and make it central, because it is the underlying foundation of our heritage, of our cultural mores. So it's all very well talking the talk, standing in front of a Christmas tree, sunshine. Let's see you walk the walk in 2026. Let's do some messages now before I go for a break. God bless you for being such a trooper and working when you feel so ill. Oh, thank you, Adrian in Wales. Well, there you go. I'm going to, 2.5 hours and I'm on the train back to the West Country. Then I've actually got to start preparing for Christmas because I've done nothing yet, basically. I really haven't. I haven't had time. I've just been working. Now, this is an interesting one. Richard in Yorkshire says, looks like Norway has just discovered millions of barrels worth of oil just on their side of the North Sea borderline with the UK. I wonder how far into our territory the wells will reach. But then, of course, Labour demolished any of our rigs and pipelines around that area. So now we can just buy it from Norway, including taxes, instead of pumping it up ourselves. Brilliant business plan, Labour. Blooming brilliant. What idiot is responsible for this stupidity? Well, multiple idiots, but primarily Ed Miliband. And we're going to be talking about this later because, of course, not only did Ed Miliband sabotage our energy self-sufficiency by concreting over our oil wells, which is normally the act of a hostile state, often an act of terrorism, frankly, but he banned any exploratory drilling. Of course there's oil on our side. Of course there is. And if you look at our energy makeup, we still rely extremely heavily on imports of oil and gas, predominantly from Norway. So in a way, this is good news for us because at one point Norway seemed to be running out and they've got it. So great, we can continue buying it from Norway so we can keep the lights on. But why aren't we getting it out ourselves? It'll give us a geopolitical edge. We could use the money that we make from it to put into a sovereign wealth fund, to prop up pensions, to actually get new hospitals, Lord knows what. It could help fund, if they're so, hell-bent on this whole energy transition, then use that as the method by which we can fund a transition. We're going to be discussing this later because the UK is poised to sign up to the EU's Energy Pact, which is going to be an unmitigated disaster. I'm going to give you all the ghoulish details of that a bit later on in the programme, so do stay tuned. Jack in Gravesend says, Merry Christmas, Alex, to you, your family, and all your listeners here at Talk. Oh, you beautiful soul, thank you. Keep fighting the good fight in the new year. Let's hope sense will return and right will be done to the many wrongs in the previous years. Long live the Christian faith and Christmas celebrations in this United Kingdom. Have a cider for the sore throat. Rest up. Ooh, mulled cider. Oh, that's what I want. I got a lush recipe for mulled cider. Need proper scrumpy. You put in your cinnamon, maybe a couple of cloves, a bit of nutmeg in there, some cardamom pods, slice of orange. Why not? It's basically mulled wine, isn't it? Warm it up. Don't let it boil because you don't want that alcohol to evaporate. In fact, throw even more alcohol in on top. A bit of sliced spiced rum. Glug that in there. Whack that back. And that is how Christmas should begin. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about all the stories affecting the health service, including a warning over AI chatbots being used for mental health support this Christmas. That's after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried having a chit-chat with Glock about things. I found myself doing that when I've woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I've got questions I want answered. People are increasingly using things like artificial intelligence chatbots for mental health support. But Dr. Adrian James, who's National Medical Director for NHS England for mental health, said a growing trend of people using chatbots for counselling is dangerous because the technology tells people what they want to hear and can give completely wrong advice. Let's speak to Dr. Lawrence Buckman now, who's a retired NHS GP, former chair of the BMA's GPs Committee. Good morning to you, Dr. Lawrence. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. And before we go any further, happy birthday for a couple of days' time.
Hey, thank you. It is, of course, following Christmas, the even more important celebration of Alexmas, as you did indeed identify. I'll probably be 6 foot under by then, given how quickly this virus seems to be developing. Anyway, let's talk about this because, I remember speaking to a guy years ago when I lived in Brussels who was developing AI chatbots for the purpose of mental health guidance. And I was thinking, given how long waiting lists are, given how lonely some people can feel and how difficult it is to access so-called talking therapists, perhaps it is a sort of fairly decent sticking plaster. However, Dr. Adrian James has turned around and said, actually, no, this could be dangerous. What's your take on that?
I agree with him. It's a great substitute when you've got nothing, but unfortunately, there's very good evidence to show that it's harmful in a variety of situations. The biggest study was done in Stanford University 2 years ago in America of chatbots and what they did. And what's clear is that not only do they tell you what you want to hear rather than what you should hear, they're no good at spotting people who are seriously ill who need a psychiatrist right now. And that's the biggest worry, is that you're going to be using this because you feel you can't get any help any quicker. And so you're going to be talking to a machine that sympathizes rather than empathizes, that is trained to give you the answers you might like rather than the answers that you might need to hear. And even if it did all of that, what it can't do is play hunches, which is what psychotherapists like me do, which is listen to what people are saying and then work out how to proceed further. And it's very difficult to do that with the current large language models.
I suppose as well, I think back to a very tragic incident in my own sort of social circle. One of my best friends from high school sadly took his own life this year. And there had been some warning signs he wasn't doing so well, and he was actually having talking therapy, but he was actually very good at disguising quite how critical a state he was in. And so one imagines as well, if people are using AI, then you haven't got a human on the other end of this saying, I think this person might need to be sectioned for their own safety, or there needs to be a direct intervention because it's reached a critical 11th hour.
That's exactly why it's a problem. If you're happy and you're just chatting and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, there's no real reason why you can't carry on doing that. But what it isn't doing is giving you psychotherapy or behavior therapy, or indeed emergency intervention when there's something clearly very seriously amiss for which you need expert help right now. And people who need expert help right now, that is available. The waiting lists don't apply to someone who is acutely ill. Someone who's acutely ill will get it today, and indeed they almost certainly need it today. And no bot yet works well enough to do that. In fact, I don't think a bot would ever be able to do that when it comes to making sense of what people are telling them when you suddenly realise that you're in the presence of somebody really dangerously mentally ill.
I think as well, it's just reflecting on this, when you are using AI, you are the person doing the inputs, and depending on how you phrase your question, even down to which words you use, your punctuation, will determine what the response is. And so you've got people who often put online what ideal prompts would be if you want to get certain answers. Whereas when you have a situation of therapy, it's the other way around. It's the therapist asking the questions and the patient answering them.
Yeah, that's precisely so. And that's the reason why bots are a menace. They're great for all sorts of things, but not for this. The moment you think you need help, you need to talk to a mental health professional or your GP or both, and you need it now. Certainly people who are contemplating harming themselves, they need a psychiatrist right now.
Let's move on to the flu-nami that is inundating the NHS with very poorly people. Medical bodies are pushing urgently for pregnant women to go and get their flu vaccine without delay. What is so significant about the wave of flu we're having this year? And has the vaccine this year got its right? Because I know in years past we've developed vaccines for a particular strain of flu and then been hit with a completely different one.
Right. This year's strain is, as are all flu strains, old. The question is, how old were you when you last met this virus? And the chances are younger people have not met this virus before, this particular version of it. So the flu jab prevents you from getting very severe flu normally, and it also is pretty effective. It's not as effective as some other vaccines, but it is pretty effective, and this year's version is pretty effective. Not brilliant, but pretty effective. And the reason why this matters for pregnant women is that their immunity is not quite the same as everybody else, and their risk of getting a serious infection added onto flu, typically it's pneumonia they get, when pregnant, is something you really want to avoid because they end up in hospital.
How do people, I think this is an important question to ask of a doctor, how do people know when it's flu, when they might need to get help, or if it's just a bad cold? Because very often you get people saying, oh, I've got flu, and you think, well, it's probably a bug. I mean, right now I feel wretched. I don't think it's flu. I had flu at the very start of this year, and my word, the colleague I was with over in America had to extend his stay in America by 2 weeks because he was hospitalised, and I came back and I don't think I left bed for 2 weeks, had vestibular neuritis. I mean, I was a wreck for about 6 months afterwards. So I'm pretty sure what I had was a pretty gnarly flu. But how do people at home, when they start feeling poorly, might get a cough, a splutter, how can they differentiate between, well, this is a severe head cold, or this is some other form of RSV, or this is COVID, or actually, I think I've got the big one?
Right. Those three, COVID, flu, and a cold, start off the same way. But rapidly, they divide into those three that you can spot. Let's get COVID out the way first. Your sense of taste and smell will change. It may well disappear completely. With a cold, you don't feel ill. You've got a runny nose, you're coughing, and you might feel very slightly under, but not particularly. Flu does what you just described. You go flat, you can't get out of bed, you ache all over. Nobody with a cold aches all over. So if you feel achy and you're in bed for 2 weeks, that's flu. COVID doesn't do quite like that. COVID may also put you into bed and may make you ache, but the prominent thing is tummy upsets and particularly diarrhea and altered taste and smell. So you can tell the difference between these three. Most people who think they've got flu out of flu season have got a cold.
And if you think you're really beginning to sick of something, what is the best thing you can do? Because there are a lot of people out there, you know, the doctor's orders always bed rest and paracetamol if you've got a bit of a fever, or to get rid of headaches and all the rest of it. I swear by the liquid vitamin C sachets the minute I start feeling poorly. I chuck those back in my body and try and sort of fill myself up with honey, lemon, turmeric, those sorts of things. Is that sort of sensible advice?
That's sensible advice for people who've got a cold. That will certainly make a difference to that. Influenza, you can't really change very much. What you need to do is not overheat yourself. So although naturally you feel cold and want to get under the duvet, actually that's the thing you don't want to do. You want to keep your temperature at, well, as low as practical, because people with the flu have a high fever, and the last thing they need is to be cooked any further than they are already. That's what you do for flu, and there's, as you said, a lot of it about right now.
There is indeed. Dr. Lawrence, thank you ever so much. Finn just said to me, you're just having a free doctor's appointment right now, aren't you, Alex? I was like, yes, I am. I woke up in sweats last night, so I'm not sure how I'm going to progress going forward. Fingers crossed. I've already had flu this year, so I think I'm going to be okay. Right, okay. Let's take a short break now. When I come back, I want to hear from you. There's a lot to talk about today. Alison in Nottinghamshire says Keir Starmer's Christmas message sounds like it's come straight from ChatGPT. Sounds as sincere as always. I think he actually just sounds like a bot, doesn't he? And John in Wallington says Badenoch will never beat Nigel Farage in any future elections. She is the establishment choice. Farage is the people's choice. You know, I do think there's been a whole lot of hoo-ha around Badenoch and her performance lately. And I hate to be a stickler, but I do think when I see her performing well at PMQs, she's always got her notes in front of her. You know, they rehearse and they practice PMQs pretty much the day before. They've got the questions, they've got their little lines worked out. All she has to do is stand there and deliver it. What I still haven't seen is how she is like completely by herself when she's not delivering some sort of speech at a podium and she's not being scripted with zingers at the dispatch box. I want to see her out, about and reactive, and I kind of want to know what her ideology is because I'm still not sure. I know where she stands when it comes to the culture wars, but I still don't really know what Badenoch is and really looks like. And I think we all want to know that. OK, right, let me know your thoughts on the things we're talking about today, and I want to speak to some of you after the break, so pick up your phone and dial this number, 03444 1000. It's your normal network rate. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send a text message. Right, talk before you text. I'm back after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Look, I've got my little vitamin C sachet. I forgot to take it this morning. Now, it's important, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to have vitamin C. And nuking a virus with vitamin C, I swear, does work really well. But you've got to get these liquid ones for liposomal encapsulation because that means it's actually absorbed into the body as much as you might like taking the supplements in a dry tablet format. My understanding is they don't really work. So if, like me, you're beginning to snuffle and have a scratchy voice and feel a bit under the weather, I highly recommend these bad boys. They don't come cheap, but all my doctor friends swear by them. There you go. There's a little bit of festive health advice from Dr. Alex. Let's hit up the phone lines and speak to Louise, who's in Kent. Hi, Louise.
Hi, Alex. Now, I heard you do your monologue last Easter on Good Friday, and it was absolutely brilliant. talking about the Easter story. Absolutely brilliant. So I was going to say about this Christian thing. We are a Christian country. There's no doubt about it. People might think, oh, well, I'm atheist, faith or whatever. Everything in this country is built around Christian foundations. That's the whole point. And actually what really annoys me, it's not, there's Muslim 5 million, but what is not helping is big companies, supermarkets who decide to say, well, let's call the winter trees instead of Christmas trees.
Yeah.
Schools who say, well, we can't have a nativity this year because it's not inclusive. And yet they go on and put on things like Diwali and all sorts of things like that instead. That's what really bothers me, that it's being driven as well by people who say they want to be inclusive. No, the first thing that should happen is that all the Christian events should take priority. All the other bits are added extras.
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting. Shall I do a bit of a Christmas monologue? Shall I try and give it a go off the top of my head?
I'd love you to, yeah.
Shall we see what I can ad-lib on this? OK, Here we go. Now, I think the most important thing to remember at Christmas time is the fact that this is, for a Christian, this is God incarnate. Our God is not a remote God who judges, who is vengeful, who is nasty, who has a gangster-like approach to you must stay in the clan, you've got to pray to me multiple times a day, you've got to persecute people who aren't part of our tribe. It doesn't have that mentality. In fact, what it represents is God incarnate, himself coming down as a helpless baby to grow and experience humanity for himself, to be someone who can be directly relatable to other humans, to grow into a human being who is perfect in their entirety, yet walks the earth as do we all, and by doing so sets an example. And through the incarnation of God as Jesus Christ, we arrive at the second covenant, which is the relationship between man and God. And this is the most fundamentally important aspect of Christianity, because it is through the embodiment of God as Jesus Christ that we are taught the lessons that we should follow of how to behave as human beings. And should we all be as close to behaving like that as possible, there really would be peace on earth. And so that is why Christianity is one of the most important things that's ever happened, if not the most important thing that's ever happened to the world. Whether you believe in the virgin birth, the resurrection, it is an established fact that Jesus existed, that he was a historical figure. Now, whether you believe he was God incarnate or not, in some respects is immaterial, because the existence of this man and the lessons he gave to civilization fundamentally shaped the world, which is why we live in the year 2025. The whole world does, because before Christ and after Christ is a very different distinction in the direction that humanity took. The ancient world was barbaric. I've just come back from a Pompeii exhibition at the Excel Centre, and you are reminded about the hedonism, the violence, the gladiatorial rings, the sort of a very different, skewed morality compared to what we think is the moral order of today. And the moral order of today was fundamentally established by Jesus Christ. It differentiated from the teachings of the Old Testament, although that still stands. And Christianity and the birth of that man in Bethlehem basically has brought the world into the civilized state it is today, where we know that murder is wrong, where we know that stealing is wrong, where we largely have diplomacy and democracy, and also because the message of Christianity is to become more like God. We have created some of the greatest innovations on earth. And when I think about the stories of Jesus Christ healing people, and I think about how we have developed over the past 2025 years to ourselves becoming healers, where he performed miracles to rid people of leprosy, we as human beings, the further we have developed and come closer to him in our advancements and through modern medicine, are learning to heal these diseases ourselves, which is why Christianity fundamentally changed the world, delivered innovations, all of the great things that have benefited all of mankind, of every creed, colour, race and religion, largely have come out of Christendom. That is a fact. That's not me being some sort of Christian supremacist. If you look at all of the brilliant things, modern medicine, vaccines, electricity, the telephone, the television, the internet, the world, everything. Most of those things, the vast majority, in fact, have come from Christendom, and largely people who are devout believers in Jesus, because our religion does not hold that back. It doesn't say that actually God's law is final and doing anything else is actually in contravention of what he taught us. And we need to remember this. And what I would urge at Christmas time is to also look at the persecution of Christians. The most peaceful people on earth at the moment are the ones most likely to be killed by terrorists in places like middle Nigeria, in the Middle East. Look at the demographic changes that have happened. The birthplace of Jesus, Bethlehem, not long ago was 80% Christian. Then it got given to the Palestinian Authority, and guess what? They were all forced out. There's now fewer than 10% Christians living in Bethlehem, and it's the very first time pilgrims have been able to go there, because before that the threat was too great. And this country needs to lead the way. If we're going to accept refugees from the Middle East, then shall we not accept Yazidis? Should we not accept the very Christians who have been forced out of their homelands? Because Christianity emanated from the Middle East, and the countries that are now riddled with terrorism were once great Christian nations. Turkey was a Christian nation, Egypt was a Christian nation, Syria was a Christian nation, Lebanon was a Christian nation. They haven't always been Muslim. Islam came almost 1,000 years later, and we need to be very keenly aware, whether you're a believer in the resurrection and in the virgin birth and in God incarnate or not, one thing is clear. Cultural Christianity has been the most profoundly important thing ever to shape the world. And I beg you all to remember that and to celebrate that tomorrow. Pass your presents, enjoy your family and your community, but remember the message of Christ and put Christ back in the centre of Christmas.
Alex, that other wonderful strapline, love came down at Christmas.
Love did come down at Christmas.
That, to me, is so important. The other thing is about your flu. Right, I had the lurgy a couple of weeks ago. When I tried to work out what I'd got, the one thing I did discover is when the symptoms come on, if it's flu, it will hit you really hard within 24 hours.
Oh, that's true. This ain't
cold
flu.
Or something, it will take 4 or 5 days to build up, and that's certainly what happened for me. It took 4 days before, actually, it wiped me out for 2 days in bed. I mean, that's okay. But I knew what it was because of that. But Mum was very into old-fashioned nursing when she was alive.
Yeah.
If you were really unwell, you went to bed, didn't go on to watch TV on the settee, went to bed, fluids, and you stayed there until you felt better to be able to get up a little bit, and then you were gentle on yourself, and you got over it better in the long run.
There you are, exactly. When you've got flu, you go to bed and you can't watch TV. You're just too ill. This isn't flu. This is generic lurgy, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to conquer it in a couple of days. Louise, thank you ever so much. It's been brilliant having your call. Let's squeeze in Dorothy, who's in Lancashire. Hello, Dorothy.
Hi, Alex. I would like to echo what Louise said about your Easter monologue. I listened to that, and it really made my Good Friday. I had an elderly 90-year-old friend who's a strong Christian. I was telling her about it, so that's just an aside. But what I've rung about is our lovely Mr. Starmer's Christmas message. As a farmer, it slightly riled me, because if he just had a generic message, but the fact he has to mention the NHS, and obviously we're all very grateful to our NHS, but, they are not the only people working on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And it really annoys me. Farmers, I've been a farmer's daughter, farmer's wife, I'm 70 now, and we have never, ever not worked on Christmas Day.
Right.
So, it's just what we do. And the fact you have to single out somebody and thank them, but we don't get a mention.
I totally agree. It drove me mad with the pots and pans during COVID, because no one banged pots and pans for the delivery drivers. No one banged pots and pans for people working in factories on production lines. And the thing is with this whole sort of our NHS, I don't feel like it's our NHS anymore, because I don't seem to be able to get an appointment. I'd struggle if I wanted to be seen by a GP. And it's almost like, because it's our biggest state-funded entity, it is the sort of incarnation of the state, if you will. It feels like sort of socialist realism as an aesthetic with Stakhanovites. You know, they had this guy called Stakhanov and statues of him throughout communist Russia so people could sort of bow down and worship the worker. And sometimes I feel this sort of religiosity surrounding the NHS is was just pretty Marxist. But, you know, that's not to say doctors and nurses aren't vital and don't work hard. But farmers, let's give a round of applause to them. Dorothy, thank you ever so much for your call. We've got to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because there's so much still to come. I'll see you on the other side.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back, and Merry Christmas Eve to one and all. What are you up to? Are you at work like me, or are you starting to get your festive arrangements in place? Perhaps you're marinating some bird, I mean poultry, that is. Chopping your vegetables, making your stuffing, drenching your Christmas pud in booze, hanging up stockings, wrapping presents, decorating the tree, watching black and white films. I don't know, let me know. But I hope you're having a wonderful time and you're excited about tomorrow, because Christmas really is a very special time of the year. It hasn't felt very Christmassy this year. It really hasn't. You know, I just haven't seen many decorations in shop windows, but still, we'll make the most of it, won't we? Some pretty grim news about today, unfortunately. That seems to sort of be the tone of the year, particularly in the form of this huge would-be terrorist attack that was intercepted by undercover officers. Thank goodness. It reminds us all that there are people amongst us who very much do not share our values and wish us great harm indeed. Now, if you want to join us in conversation, please do. 03 44499 1000 is the number. You can phone up and register your interest, and we'll give you a call back when we are taking calls. I'd love to speak to lots of you today. I'd love it if you all got on the blower. It'd be wonderful to hear from you on whatever you want to talk about, really. You can also send me a WhatsApp on that number or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. I do love a voice note. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. Write the word talk before you text. OK, let's go back to the headlines today as we're joined by Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. Hello, how are you doing, Sebastian?
Doing well. Merry Christmas, Alex.
Merry Christmas to you. You don't have much Christmassiness around you. I was hoping you might be sitting in front of a big sparkling tree.
I could only wish. No, I'm visiting family, so I am in the spare bedroom.
Hey. Oh, well, I hope you're looking forward to spending much-deserved family time talking about spending family time. This is a really sad story because the son of a farmer who took his own life in order to spare having to pay inheritance tax has really gone after Sir Keir Starmer after he's finally watered down his plans. They've raised the threshold at which point farmers need to pay inheritance tax from 1 million to 2.5 million. And this comes after the president of the NUF met with the Prime Minister 10 days ago and told him in great detail about the human consequences of the policy. My question is, why wasn't this done? Why wasn't there consultation? Why wasn't there an impact assessment before this policy was rolled out? Even when it was rolled out, they didn't listen at all. It seems to me they pushed ahead despite the NUF saying this is how many farms are going to be affected. You just don't understand. This isn't people who are just, I don't know, trying to squirrel away money in the form of owning land. This land is their land that they use as their work. It's not cash in the bank. It's a material asset needed if they're going to do their job, and all they want to do is make sure the next generation can continue to put food on our tables. I mean, it's all very well doing a U-turn now, and thank goodness it's happened, but what it does expose is a willful, ignorant, belligerent Prime Minister who didn't listen and didn't consult in the first place at great cost to certain individuals.
Yeah, I mean, look, to answer this, we have to cast our mind back to the second half of last year, and the aim of the game was to find money. There was a massive black hole to plug, and the Treasurer is ferociously looking for places to find that. And from, I think, a place of fairness, they looked at farmers who don't pay inheritance tax on their assets. And we know there are people who aren't the hard-working farmers that we all value for putting food at our table, who are buying those kinds of assets only to pass them on without paying any tax. It's not what farmland should be used to do. So this adjustment, and I do think it's an adjustment, gets the balance slightly differently, doesn't it? It raises a little bit less more money for the Exchequer. It's 300 million instead of about 500 million, but it means that only half the number of farms are affected, and those that are taken out then of paying this are the smaller farms, the smaller family-owned farms, which I think need more support and need more help than the larger farms, many of which will be owned by people who maybe aren't in the best of faith.
Why was the policy such a dumpster fire in the first place? You don't get to do this. Do you know what I mean? I'm glad there's been a U-turn and a correction. It shouldn't have been the big mess it was in the first place. He should have consulted the farmers. He should have consulted the NUF. And quite frankly, Sebastian, 300 million is blimmin' nothing. It's a penny down the back of the sofa when it comes to the government's budget. The fact that they've managed to scare up billions of pounds to pay people with multiple children seems to me their priorities are totally wrong. What's more important, feeding the nation or making sure people who might not even be in work can carry on having kids?
Well, I think the most important thing is having a safety net for those people who need it. We don't live in the Victorian times anymore. If you fall on hard times, you should be supported by taxpayers like you and I who are willing to help out. Look, I think on the farming side, let's not get sidetracked. This isn't about closing down farms. This is about making sure that if you pass assets on, then you are doing that fairly. Even under these plans, you can pass on £6 million worth of assets without paying a penny in tax. Now, look, I don't have £6 million lying around, and I'm sure many people listening and watching won't either. And when they die and pass on, they will pay tax on often on what they transfer to their children. So it's really about fairness, isn't it? And making sure that the level is right where farmers aren't penalised, but they're also paying their fair share when they do come to pass that
acres of arable land, which are harvested with combines, and that isn't money in the bank. It might be money in the bank if someone decided to sell it to BlackRock or something, but it's not actual money in the bank. It is the tools of the trade. It is the land in which vegetables are grown, cattle is reared. I mean, why don't they understand this basic difference? Has the Labour Party got a problem with the countryside?
Look, most assets aren't money in the bank. If you own your home, it isn't money in the bank. If you own shares, it isn't money in the bank.
But your home isn't the thing that earns money and grows vegetables, is it? It's very clear. I can make a distinction between farmers' land and other assets. You know, other assets aren't necessarily the assets you need for work. Farmers' land is the actual soil, the turf, the ground in which, you know, the fecund environment within which our food is made.
Look, we can agree that farming is incredibly important for our economy and for our well-being in this country. But what that doesn't mean is that we should create some kind of a tax haven that you can park your money in order to be able to dodge paying what you owe to the Treasury. You know, Jeremy Clarkson is the classic example of someone who's been very upfront about the fact that he only bought a farm because it was beneficial for tax purposes. You know,
yes, but then he ended up farming that farm and learning very quickly what is involved, how tight the margins are, how little money farmers make, and actually being able to share that experience with us. It's been, one might argue, very critical in our understanding of what the agricultural industry is really like.
Look, good for him for doing the hard work, but there are many people who don't, and that is the problem. And look, you can pull all sorts of examples of people who do vital work. There are people who spend their entire livelihoods making clothes for us to wear, but should clothing companies be able to pass down their assets tax-free? I don't think that would be fair. So we can't go creating these wild exceptions just because of these reasons that we value what they do. There are other ways of showing the way we value it, and I think what we've landed on, that £6 million passed on tax-free, is incredibly generous. So the solution is there.
But it's clear they didn't do a proper consultation or impact assessment, isn't it?
I don't know what they did. I don't work in the Treasury. To be honest, it's going back a year now, so I can't remember what happened. But the point is they had to find money very quickly. So, yes, they did do some things, as we know, that weren't in the manifesto. But it was that moment that Reeves has described, coming into the Treasury, seeing the books, using words I can't say on your channel to describe her frustration, and then having to find a way to solve the problem.
Kemi Badenoch has vowed that she is going to get the UK working again rather than being like the Prime Minister who is siding with benefits claimants over workers. This has been an accusation against Sir Keir Starmer from the beginning, when initially he couldn't even explain what a working person was, and seemingly keeps hammering people, Alarm Clock Britain, people who go out and toil and strive and are finding it difficult to make ends meet, are being increasingly hammered in taxation, and that money seems increasingly to going towards people who can't be bothered, quite frankly, people who break into the country illegally, who we're putting up in hotels and affording for them to have pocket money, smartphones, yoga lessons, a lot of other people who might, be people who've come into the country from foreign lands who are then living on welfare and having children. Why on earth is he not putting us first? That's what I want to know. That's what a lot of the country's asking.
Well, look, Alex, you know this, that if you move to this country and you are an economic migrant, you don't have recourse in most situations to public funds, which means that you can't just come here and claim benefits. That is a complete myth. It's peddled by the tabloid press, and it's really disappointing to see them do that because it doesn't help anybody. Now, look, there are some people who need our help. Some of them are British, some of them are foreign-born, and I think we owe them that because the point is...
Why do we owe someone foreign-born our help?
Because these are people who are coming here legally, they are working, they will fall on hard times, they might have a family death, they might become ill themselves, they are out of the workforce, and it is in our economic interest to help them temporarily to get them back into the workforce so they can continually earning wages and paying taxes that benefit all of us. So even if you look at this in a purely financial way, it is beneficial to us to support people rather than booting them out and it's one strike and you're out. But I would argue there's also a compassionate element as well, that if you are contributing and you are part of our society and part of our communities, we owe you that support if you fall.
Do you not think we need to be a bit stricter when it comes to this, though? Because we are extremely generous as a country when it comes to how quickly people can access benefits, how many people can bring over as dependents. We know actually that a lot of the myth about the contribution of people coming into this country, migration and growing the GDP, just aren't true. They're not borne out in financial reality. In fact, largely speaking, the amount of tax the average person will pay over the lifetime is gobbled up by just one person who's come in as a foreign-born dependent. I mean, that is ridiculous.
Well, the Home Office is cracking down on these things. They are limiting who can come over and which dependents can come. But you have to ask yourself why economic migrants are coming in the first place. They're not just coming on a jolly. They need a reason. They need a job to come to. And the reason that job is vacant is because we can't fill it. Now, yes, there is an argument that we need to be training people in our country, giving them opportunities so they can do those jobs. That is true. Completely agree. But that's going to take time. Those doctors won't be there tomorrow. Those labourers won't be there tomorrow. And in the meantime, we need to bring in that labour from elsewhere to fill those jobs, because otherwise our country does just start to fall apart. We really rely on immigration. We can have a debate on whether that's a good thing or not, but at the moment that is the reality.
Let's talk about the 36,000 illegal migrants who are going to spend Christmas in hotels paid for by me, paid for by you, paid for by most of my listeners. That doesn't seem very fair, does it?
I don't think it's fair on anybody. I don't think anybody wants to be living in a hotel like that. I don't think anybody wants to be paying for it. And that's why the right thing to do is to reduce that hotel use. Now, it wouldn't be Christmas Eve if I didn't give you some good news. All of the data on this, or at least a lot of it, is pretty positive. If you look at the number of asylum seekers in hotels, wind your mind back to September 2023, there were 56,000. Today, there are 32,000, a big reduction.
Where did all those people who are not in hotels go?
They would have gone to alternative accommodation.
There you go. They're still going to taxpayer-funded accommodation. It's just not called a blimmin' hotel. It's got a military barracks or an HMO. It's no blimmin' difference, is it? They've just moved from one type of building to a different one.
For some of them, yes, and there are many people who feel that there are other more appropriate forms of accommodation. That is a matter of opinion. But other people will have had their claims processed, because that is the big difference this government is doing. It's actually processing asylum seeker claims, which the Tories sadly weren't, which meant that the number of people in hotels went up and up and up on the Tories' watch. They're being processed. Those that are being approved are then moving out of any form of taxpayer-funded accommodation, and those that are having their claims rejected are being moved on elsewhere, and they are no longer an issue for the United Kingdom. So the system is now up and running, and that is the key difference between Labour and the Tories.
Do you think that this is going to be Starmer's last Christmas as Prime Minister?
I don't think so. I hope not. This is a long-term project. He was elected on a 5-year mandate, and I would love to see him see that through. And I think anybody should be hoping for that, because it's the one thing we haven't had since David Cameron is the last MP to see through an entire term. And that means we've been throwing out our prime ministers every 2 or 3 years. A new one comes in. Yes, they're from the same party, but they're coming with their own agenda. And you've got that really fractured, disjointed form of government that, as we can all see, hasn't helped us. So I would love to see a solid 5-year term, and maybe not, let's make a Christmas wish, a second term as well, to really see through that agenda.
Have you been surprised by what Starmer's agenda has been? Because it wasn't exactly signposted much in the manifesto. A lot of the things he's brought in seem to have come out of the blue sky, and has surprised a lot of people.
No, I haven't been surprised, and I've been quite pleased, because it lands where I am, which is progressive but also pragmatic. I think a lot of what previous Labour leaders have talked about would not have been realistic, but this is about working with what we've got, but changing it through a prism of fairness. And I think you can apply that to a lot of the policy making, whether it's breakfast clubs and making sure that those who need the help can be supported, private schools, making sure that they're paying their fair share. And all of these are through this view of fairness and making sure that we are a fairer country, which I think under the Tories, sadly, we weren't. We only went further away from that.
It's interesting. I think a lot of people's criticism of this government is it all feels very unfair. But Sebastian, I always value you. As you know, I love the fact we can have a robust conversation. And I love the fact, Merry Christmas to you, Sebastian, because I love the fact that you're willing to walk into the Lion's Den, come on a channel such as ours, and I'm sure all of our viewers appreciate you as well. I hope you have a really beautiful Christmas with your family this year.
It was a pleasure. You too.
Thank you, Sebastian. Right, OK, after the break, it's time to speak to the brilliant Charlie Downs. Is that what I Phil, what am I calling Phil? Finn. Are we on Charlie Downs next, or is that a bit later? Yeah, Charlie's next. There you go. We had a little schedule move around, you see, because Charlie was waiting for workmen to turn up. So we've now got him after the break, which I'm very much looking forward to, because he is so incisive when it comes to analysing the immigration situation in this country. That's coming up after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back, and don't forget it's Christmas time, and so we're going to be reminded constantly that Jesus and his family were refugees. It is really annoying. If you listen to me every day, you'll know that that one's really getting stuck in my craw. But on that theme, let us talk about illegal immigration into this country. The 36,000 illegal migrants are spending Christmas in hotels paid for by you. Aren't we generous this Christmas time? Let's catch up now with Charlie Downs. Hi, Charlie.
Hello, Alex. How you doing?
Yeah, well, I could feel better if I'm honest with you, but I'm all the better for seeing you, my darling. Now, I mean, I'm really getting annoyed at this message that, Jesus and his family were refugees. Yes, of course, they went to Egypt when King Herod wanted to kill everyone because he thought it could be the birth of Jesus. But they went to a place basically a few miles away, which was in the same Roman Empire and would have been a Jewish community, and stayed there for a very brief moment of time for their own safety before they could go back, which is a very different situation. So these hordes of young men traipsing across multiple countries, paying really hardened, nefarious people traffickers to come and work in the black market, isn't it?
Yeah, well, like you, I find the co-opting of Jesus Christ for kind of modern political sort of contemporary issues very distasteful and essentially blasphemous, quite honestly, not to get too heavy on this, what should be quite a light and happy day, I think. But this, the concept of the refugee has taken on an entirely different meaning in our time, I think. We know that the legal framework that defines refugees and permits people to claim asylum in our country came into being in the aftermath of the Second World War, when people genuinely were fleeing persecution. But the word refugee now, for a lot of people, essentially means somebody who is, kind of entering a country often illegally, looking for bed and board, and essentially to take advantage of a system that is no longer fit for purpose. And I think this is actually a tragedy in its own right, because refugees obviously exist, authentic refugees. But I think the hearts of the British have been hardened as a result of people who call themselves refugees, but who are in fact illegal economic migrants, taking advantage of that label. And we have learned today that literally almost 40,000 of those kinds of people are going to be spending Christmas in hotels on our taxpayer money. And I think that this is particularly troubling given the figures that I've been reading about this morning about how retailers have experienced a real downturn in sales and in business this Christmas as against last Christmas. And that's not surprising because I think most people in this country are feeling the squeeze, whether that's due to reducing wages or increasing taxes or just a general increase in the cost of living that I think we are all very much feeling. I think it's particularly insulting to see people who have no business being here, who have come here illegally, essentially getting everything that we would like paid for them. You know, a nice meal, nice warm bed, and so on. I don't imagine they'll be getting presents, but then I wouldn't put that past anything. Put that past the Home Office.
Oh, I bet you there'll be some sort of NGOs giving out Christmas presents this year. But, you know, I was speaking to a taxi driver last night about this, and we were having this conversation. And I said, if you're coming from, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa, and you've traipsed across various countries to get into the United Kingdom, you find yourself in a hotel, and then from there you start working in the black market, and say you're working cash in hand and getting 100 quid a day. Or maybe it might be less than that, but still, say it was 100 quid a day, you're making about £2,000 every single month. Now that £2,000 is completely tax-free, and you've got nothing else to spend, have you? Because you're not having to pay for your rent or a mortgage or anything, or bills or anything like that. That's all food. All of that is catered for. So you're basically getting £2,000 a month in savings, which for the average Brit is a lot more than anyone could ever get. And for the person coming from sub-Saharan Africa, that £2,000 a month that they're getting is equivalent to 2 years of work. You know, the average salary is probably about 800 quid a year. And so if it'd be the equivalent of us going in somewhere, going to you know, a place, being put up in a hotel, working, you know, on the sly, and making every month around £25,000.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are cases where these people are sending all of that money back to the people traffickers, but you are right. In a lot of cases, these people are coming here, and Macron was right about this, because we have an economy that facilitates what amounts to illegal work. As you say, tax-free work. And then this money goes to God only knows where. Quite often, I imagine it will be sent back to the country that these people have come from in the form of remittances. We lose billions of pounds a year from our economy due to remittances because we don't impose any real tax on them. And yet we, you know, it's often it's not factored into GDP statistics. So actually, we are being drained. We're being sucked dry by a lot of these people. And I do think there's a conversation to be had about the fact that actually, why is it that these people are turning up on our doorstep in the first place? I do think it's very easy for us to blame these individuals and blame the people smugglers. And I have absolutely no time for these people. I think they should all be deported, all 2 million of them, as we laid out in a policy paper last year. I think they should all be removed from the country with extreme haste. But with that being said, you know, let's look at the countries they're coming from: Eritrea, Sudan, Afghanistan, etc. Why are these countries in the way that they are? I think a lot of it is due to the actions of the West. And this is a conversation that we're actually not prepared to have on the right a lot of the time, because it is easy and simplistic to blame these people. But actually, you know, where are we going to send them to? Like, I think that we should have a third country that we can send them to. I think the Rwanda plan was very good in this department. But actually, I do think that we, you know, the time for simplistic conversations about this issue is over, because it is causing such a huge problem in our country. I mean, how many more stories do we have to read about of people being raped and murdered by these chancers who are coming across the channel before something is done about it? And as I say, it is particularly insulting at this time of year when many of us are having to make sacrifices, and yet we watch as these people who have no place here are just put up at our expense.
I remember a brilliant speech being made by the former president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, about this. He was doing a joint press conference with Emmanuel Macron, and he was saying, these men, we don't want them getting into boats and coming to Europe. We want them to stay here. But the problem is, because you, the EU, trade with us so unfairly, our economies don't grow. Because multinational companies use you as the revolving door of 30,000 lobbyists to impose protectionist policies, we can't sell chocolate made and produced in Ghana, packaged in Ghana, and put it on on UK supermarket shelves. Instead, you can raid all the cocoa beans, which we should be using in order to create manufacturing and then grey-collar jobs that come off the back of that. And I think that is one of the greatest lessons that we need to learn. And also, I don't understand why, particularly when it comes to Gulf countries, who we actually happen to sell a lot of defence technology to, we don't turn around and say to them, listen, unless we can, instead of selling you defence technology, we're more than happy to put a bit of investment into you, providing makeshift accommodation for refugees so they're not leaving the neighbourhood if they're genuine refugees. The neighbouring countries to these war zones largely do absolutely naff all, when it would cost us far less money to establish refugee camps in those places than it does putting them up here where the cost of living's so high.
Yeah, and this, I find this really frustrating as well, because, our aid spending is completely ineffective. We spend billions of pounds a year on foreign aid. The main recipient of foreign aid since 2019 has been Afghanistan. And that has done a whole lot of good, hasn't it? I mean, the aid model that we use right now just doesn't work. The aid model that much of the West uses does not work, because quite often this money is either pocketed by corrupt elites in those countries, or it is laundered and cycled back to our own countries. And that's the darkest thing. I think there's been a lot of that in various wars over the last certainly 20 years, a lot of that happening. And so, I mean, what is our solution here? I mean, yes, it's a good idea to, I think, solve these problems at source. But how do we actually go about doing that when chucking billions of pounds at the problem doesn't seem to solve it? Does it demand a more direct form of intervention? Does it demand, the British, for example, going to these countries and establishing these refugee camps ourselves? I don't know. I mean, would that cause an international diplomatic incident? Quite possibly. But actually, something's got to be done about this issue. And all of these strategies that are being deployed by our government are not working, because we've had a whole lot of rhetoric on this issue. Certainly over the last month, we of course had Shabana Mahmood come out and lay out her Denmark-style asylum reforms, which, I mean, haven't appeared to work, because we've had huge numbers of people cross the channel in December. And for the year to December 2025, we've had more than in the year to December 2024. So the reforms of this Labour government clearly are not working. We also had the immigration bill that was passed on the 3rd of December, which is intended to target the people traffickers themselves. And once again, maybe there's not been enough time for that to actually take effect, but that doesn't seem to have changed anything either. And so there's a lot of, good talk coming out of the government. I think that's largely because of the threat that they're facing from reform in the polls, who are making a lot of hay off of this issue. But actually, there doesn't seem to be any real will to solve the issue. And I think there's a number of reasons for that, chief among which is a lot of the people who occupy positions of power in our government, elected and unelected, in the civil service, they actually believe that they're doing the right thing by putting these people up in hotels. They actually think that they are moral in these policies. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that Labour are claiming to have reduced the number of asylum hotels that are in use, which is true. It's gone from 213 at the time that they entered office down to below 200. But in that time, the number of residents in asylum hotels has increased, and more importantly, the number of HMOs, houses in multiple occupation, has increased as well. And that latter point is something that not many people, I think, understand the severity of, right? This is these asylum seekers, so-called, these economic illegal migrants, not being put into hotels where they're all in one place, where there's often security on site, but being put into houses in normal neighborhoods, in your local community, next door to me, next door to you. And that, given the criminal profile of a lot of these people that we now have a wealth of data for, that is far more dangerous than putting them in these hotels. But actually, they're moving them from these hotels into the HMOs so that the government can say, look, we're solving the problem. We are closing the hotels and solving the issue, when actually they're not. It's just obfuscation. And that seems to be the MO of this government.
But it's not just obfuscation, it's deliberate gaslighting, which I think is even more sinister. And you're right, I think these HMOs are very dangerous indeed, particularly with the news out today that our intelligence and police forces have managed to once again intercept what would be a mass casualty atrocity. And it feels like it's only a matter of time until we face something as dark as that. Charlie, thank you ever so much. It's always great to catch up with you. We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to focus our attention on crime. How very festive. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Let's speak now to Kevin Hurley, who's a former police and crime commissioner in Surrey. Hi there, Kevin. How are you doing? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, dear.
Now, let's talk about Ms. Thunberg, shall we? Because she was arrested at a Palestine Action protest after expressing support for what is now a proscribed terror organisation. She is detained outside the Aspen Insurance Building on Fenchurch Street, but released on police bail later the same day. Do you think that is stringent enough treatment of this activist?
Well, I actually think she was quite clever in the way she's got herself arrested, because the sign she held up said, "I support the Palestine Action prisoners," and it was a kind of ready-made sign, and she'd inserted the word prisoners. So the offence is actually to support Palestine Action, the terrorist proscribed group. There isn't an offence of supporting prisoners who are, if you like, on hunger strike. So she's been quite clever, and actually legally she's outsmarted the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. And I don't know if many people have picked up on that, but if you look at the sign, I thought, wow, she's so clever, she's got a defence. But back to your point, yeah, she's over making a bit of trouble. It's pretty unhelpful. There's a question really whether or not that legislation is well drafted and helpful in terms of people it's sweeping up. But I mean, Greta Thunberg, she's a grifter, isn't she? She makes a living. One day it's climate change. Next thing she's off to Gaza. Next thing she's doing this kind of stuff. It's just part of life, I'm afraid. I'm just a little bemused that she was able. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm listening intently.
Sorry. I'm just a little bit bemused, or amused is the wrong word, but I have a wry smile when I look at the sign she held up, because she's got a ready-made defence in that she's not saying I support Palestinian Action, she's saying I support the prisoners, and I don't think many people have picked up on that, including the police who arrested her.
I mean, we are a nation who holds dear the concept of free speech, well, in theory we do, and the right to assemble and to protest. But when it comes to the pro-Palestine marches, should we have been stricter about these from the outset, particularly given that extremism advisors were pointing out that the coordination and curation of these demonstrations, at least in part, were being curated by sometimes terrorist organisations and foreign hostile states?
Yeah, undoubtedly that is the case, and undoubtedly some of these style organisations that we would class as extreme Islamists are behind a lot of this, because it serves their purpose, and a lot of gullible, foolish people, or a lot of concerned, decent people have got themselves swept up into this. In terms of could we have been stronger, the problem is always twofold, really. Is there adequate legislation to deal with this? And secondly, most important, is there enough police? Are there enough courts? Are there enough prisons to deal with these people strongly? And the answer to that is no. The fact of the matter is we have not got enough officers to arrest everyone who participates in these demonstrations and says we support Palestine Action or the prescribed group. And that's the unfortunate situation we're in. And indeed, if things started to turn nasty, as quite often if you tried to make a mass arrest could, the police are not equipped in the United Kingdom to deal with serious violent disorder as they are elsewhere, because of course we don't have water cannon, we don't have these kind of mass sprays that will spray pepper spray out and distance the crowds and so on. So we still rely with what I regard are brass tactics of putting men and women in close confrontation with people, which will result in people's tempers being frayed, people being hit on both sides, police officers then being investigated, taken away from the streets, and so on. And of course, these people who police the demonstrations for us, they're not special police who come out of a box marked riot police, public order police. They're actually your local response officers where you live in Broadstairs, Bexley Heath, Brighton, wherever you are, and they're all drafted in off their normal duties, which should be catching burglars or street robbers or people who are beating up their wives and so on, because they're now wasting their time, frankly, walking alongside some of these demonstrations. So we're in a bit of a difficult position in how to deal with it. And I know, Alex, that's not that helpful.
Yeah.
But the police have got a problem how to deal with all of this.
Well, when we look at
and
some of the important work that some police officers are doing, and I look at this particularly chilling story about 2 Islamic State-inspired terrorists who were intercepted by undercover officers, who were about to go ahead and commit what could have been a mass casualty atrocity, possibly the worst terror attack in British history. That without doubt, we've got so many undocumented people here. We have people being radicalised online. We've got people being radicalised by extreme preachers in mosques. And I think, terror plots like this must be being foiled all the time. If we've got a weakened police capacity, it's going to make it so much easier for such a horrific attack to slip through the net.
I mean, you're right. I mean, I've lived and breathed the aftermath of 9/11 for the last 24 years, and I still do act now as a counter-terrorism advisor globally. The fact of the matter is there are the figures that I'm now seeing up to 40,000 people in the United Kingdom who are a concern as being involved in some ways or perhaps expressing support for Islamist-based extremist terrorism. Well, with MI5, the security services being perhaps 4,000, 5,000 strong, and a lot of those are not operational, there'll be analytical people, and with maybe only 3,000, 4,000 police officers up and down the country committed to counter-terrorism work, there simply is not enough police to keep tabs on all these threats. For me, I think the one lesson that comes out of this particular instance, apart from the fact, wow, didn't the counter-terrorist police in Greater Manchester do well infiltrating these guys and catching them, is just how vulnerable we are to someone intent on causing mass murder like this, like the attacks in France. Because the fact of the matter is, if those 2 guys had started to run amok with 2 AK-47 automatic rifles plus handguns and many, many hundreds of rounds of ammunition, they had the potential to kill hundreds and hundreds of people. And the fact of the matter is, if they'd chosen their targets carefully, we would not have had the luck that we've had so many times so far in the UK, where armed response units have just happened to be round the corner from where these various atrocities have taken place. In that, if you look at it, when we had a similar-minded attack in Borough, where the 3 guys ran amok, the martial artists with knives, we've had partially the misfortune to run into one single brave, unarmed British Transport Police officer who fought them nearly to a standstill on his own, then a Millwall supporter, and then people starting throwing crates at them. Luckily, the City of London Police, who were just the other side of the bridge, their armed response officers came across the bridge within minutes. Had they decided to carry out that attack in perhaps Croydon or Guildford or Basingstoke, it would have been a very different story in terms of the police turning up. Now, if we now move that forward and say, imagine these 2 guys had started to run amok in, say, Preston or somewhere in the area, Oldham or Rochdale or Stockport, outside of central Manchester, and they'd started machine gunning and shooting people, it would have been a very long time before armed response officers turned up. And to be clear, our armed response officers still do not carry suitable weaponry to take on people who can fire automatic weapons back at them. Because having worked in Iraq, Afghanistan, and some really dodgy places, I know that what you need to do when you're facing automatic weapons is to win the firefight by shooting back more bullets at them so you can go and take them out. Well, unfortunately, our police officers still do not have automatic weapons, because in a typical act of British compromise, we deliberately doctor the rifles that they have so they can't fire automatic fire, because we think, oh, it's bad that our police officers might spray bullets all over the place. Well, actually, the only way you can deal with someone who's got a machine gun type rifle is to spray more bullets back at them so you can close on them and shoot them yourself, or to use the technical term, neutralise them. So we're still very vulnerable to these kind of incidents.
Do you think that we're sort of living on borrowed time now? You've spoken before about jihadis maybe in the Calais camps. What do you think as a counter-terror advisor is the relationship between the huge swathes of illegal immigration taking place and the risk of there being terror plots?
Well, there's a massive risk because a substantial number of those people come from those parts of the world where extreme Islam is the way is practiced. So we're talking about northern Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, parts of North Africa, parts of northern Nigeria, where there's significant terrorism problems going on. And my bank manager is very grateful for that, because it's the kind of work that I do. But the fact of the matter is, we are vulnerable in that we've got thousands of people coming every week. We don't know who they are, but we can say a couple of things about these people. First, they are risk takers. They are mentally and morally courageous young men who are prepared to take extreme risks, to travel across Europe, face the criminal gangs, risk drowning or being run down by ships. So these are not weak people. They are risk takers. And if we've got these people in our country, young men, many full of adrenaline, some perhaps with perverted Islamist beliefs, we've got a problem. And we're seeing it every day in terms of a number of the attacks where their perverted new form of views towards women and young girls that they bring with them from Afghanistan and so on is seen with an upsurge of rapes. Afghan men are the most likely per capita by a huge margin to be responsible for rapes in the UK. And I'm talking 10, 20 times that of the indigenous UK population.
Yeah. Can you talk me through, I don't know if you know anything about Operation Plato, but it's sort of been smuggled into the occasional news reportage, which I understand as being an operational command when the police suspect that there could be a mass casualty event. Is that sort of tethered to intelligence that suggests that we are due something?
I think they used to call it Operation Kratos, which the police have prepared various doctrines of how they should deal with organised mass casualty attacks. I happen to believe, as I have from the outset, that the tactics are fatally flawed, the way that they would approach a known suicide attacker, for example. And I pray in evidence of that, the unfortunate homicide of John Charles de Menendez, where the police senior leadership, not the police officers, had developed an approach whereby they partially took the responsibility for taking the relevant critical shots, as they're called, away from the people on the ground and elevated it uphill to senior police officers. In this case, Dame Cressida Dick, or as she was then Commander Cressida Dick. You cannot control these kind of operations from control rooms many miles away with crackling radios, and the police need to learn from the experiences, dare I say it, of the Israelis or the French or indeed the Russians on how they have dealt with suspected suicide bombers in the past. Because we are trying, with these kind of incidents, to put in these strong controlled guidelines on our shooters. But what it actually means, when I say shooters, I mean our armed police, what it actually means is you take away the responsibility from them to make a decision to open fire, in that they feel that when they're finally called in by the senior leadership, they've got almost no alternative.
Wow.
Whereas the way it is elsewhere in the country, around the world, in places like, as I say, Israel and so on, where they're used to having armed police, or Americans, the authority to open fire gets delegated down to the normal police officer, as it is with a criminal. When police deal with normal criminals, it's the individual police officer's decision. But with terrorist offence, it's blurred. And hence, one of the victims of this, I would actually say, inept policy is John Charles de Menendez. And I can say that because I was involved in the early stages of development of that policy where I worked in central London. And I said at the time, we will shoot the wrong people.
Wow. Kevin, thank you ever so much for your candour. We're going to be taking a short break now, but when we come back, let's lighten the load a little bit, shall we? Because we're going to focus on the royal family as we've had a little preview of the King's Christmas message this year. We're going to be joined by royal biographer Angela Levin after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Let's talk now to Angela Levin, royal biographer, because there's quite a few royal stories knocking about today, and traditionally, as per usual, it's Christmas Eve and we're speculating about the King's Christmas message, which my understanding is going to focus around the concept of pilgrimage and has been filmed in Westminster Abbey this year.
Yes, he is. I mean, he's had a lot of criticism today. His spot is the Abbey's Ladies' Chapel, and he asked the BBC to find somewhere for him. I imagine he didn't want to have pictures on his desk because that sort of starts a huge row that Harry isn't there, Meghan's on the right side and left side and all that. So I think being outside is a very good idea. What he said is it's a pilgrimage, it's very significant for it, and people come to reflect on faith and history and national identity. It's quite a heavy thing to think about, but this place, this wonderful place, has just been full of royals for a very long time. You know, there's a vault with Charles II, William III, Mary II, Queen Anne. It's a very important one, a great stained glass by artist Hugh Easton, for many saints. And it's just extraordinary that he's going to go there. It's a place where it also does lots of things and weddings and funerals. And that's where he's going to be. My own view about this is that it's a very good idea to have it for all sorts of people of religions. But actually, I think when it's Christmas, it is actually the right thing for Christians. And I think if you're doing general things about religion, you must bring in everybody you can, because it's a very wonderful thing if you can get people to bond. But I think we don't want to take them away from Christians.
Yeah, where is the king when it comes to belief? My understanding was the late Queen was quite a strong believer in Christianity. I also read somewhere that Prince William has started to find faith. Where's our king with this? Because when he became king at his coronation, at one point he wanted to have the title of Defender of all faiths rather than Defender of the faith. Is he much of a Christian himself, do we know?
Yes, I do know. He's a very, very religious Christian.
Is he?
However, he does love other Christians too. William is just coming back in to have an interest in religion. I think this is after his wife's terrible effect with cancer, that he now feels that she's got better and she's feels well, and that actually has allowed him to feel to himself that he believes in God. And Catherine is now more interested in God, so that's her. Late Queen Elizabeth was a very religious woman, and it was church and Christians, and that was it. Not that she disliked any other religions, but she did just stick to those very, very religiously, as we could say.
Do you know, it actually pleases me to learn that Charles is a very religious man. I mean, it does sort of fill me with hope, actually, when our head of state, our sovereign, has his own personal relationship with God. Let's talk now about something rather ungodly, which is the invisible man. As these Epstein files are being drip-fed into the public domain, increasingly we are seeing correspondence coming from someone who signs emails with the letter A, therefore is known as the invisible man. But seemingly, you know, if you put things side by side, there's evidence there to suggest we know that the A might stand for Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, and some of the things that are now being disclosed are pretty shocking, aren't they?
They are shocking. I don't see why we couldn't sell it. It seems very much like Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Jeffrey Epstein particularly wanted Andrew to help with contacts in China. He sought business opportunities. Well, we know that Andrew was very interested in Chinese opportunities too. So that sort of puts that in there. That he met at Trump's with Melania, Andrew and Jeffrey. So I think that it was at Mar-a-Lago Club. And I think that probably that Trump was there, and it would have been quite understanding that Andrew would be there too. It wouldn't be some stranger who came waddling in. He was very well known there. But what's awful, and I read the stuff very carefully this morning, and that it is they had absolutely in 2010, Epstein got a deal from Andrew, 150 million oil deal. Now that is sort of huge, isn't it? How much money did he get out of him? Which I think is really shocking. And they had all sorts of people there that they paid vast amounts the whole time. And of course there's that awful picture of Andrew lying across various women, although he didn't have his clothes off. I mean, he's unlikely to be there just for doing that, isn't he?
I mean, some of this correspondence has been disclosed from the mysterious A, maybe not so mysterious A. It appears to be actively soliciting what, in the words of some of this correspondence, are inappropriate friends. Do you think that this is going to escalate? Because it seems to me what we're looking at now is pretty disturbing.
It's very disturbing, and I assume that they got rid of his title before this came. There's just one more list. The masseurs list is 254 people with redacted names, and that made me feel quite sick, actually. And whoever that was for, that was pretty disgusting. Yes, I think people will turn away even more. But what's extraordinary is that he doesn't seem to realise what a terrible mess he's made of his life and how awful he's behaving. And when the Queen says stop, and when his father says stop, he takes no.
I think you know he's a very flawed character. I've got to let you go now, Angela, because we've got to take an advert break. But thank you ever so much. We'll have you back on to talk about this again.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. 2 hours done, 1 more to go. Finn is there in my ear rallying me on. Come on, Phillips, you can do this, you can get through it. He's so lovely, is our Finn. He's looking after me so well. He's brought me some grapes, making me teas. It's like having a little mum, as well as a producer. He's a sweet boy. As is all my team. They're all blimmin' brilliant, can I just say. Right, let us kick off the first hour of the show, shall we? With Sir Keir Starmer's Christmas message.
I'd like to wish the whole country a very happy Christmas. Right now, all across the UK, people are travelling home to be with their loved ones. Children are bursting with excitement. Families are making the final preparations, wrapping presents, hanging stockings, rushing out for last-minute bits. It's a truly special time of year. And it's a time to remind ourselves what's really important. Family, friends, community. It's a time to celebrate the Christmas story and to cherish the Christian values that define it. Peace, charity, and goodwill to all. That is the promise of the season. And just as so many put their feet up, some truly special people will be pulling on their uniforms and heading out to work. Our NHS staff, emergency services, and the brave men and women of our armed forces.
I'm so inspired. I'm full of tidings of comfort and joy. Like I said earlier, there's a man who's got worse congestion than me. Let's speak to James Heal, the wonderful James Heal, Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. He's one of my faves. What you got on there, James?
Oh, sorry, I've just got my university jumper on today.
Oh, I saw. Did you go to Bristol, did you?
I did, yeah. Very proud West Country, yeah. I enjoyed it a lot.
Where are you from originally?
I'm just from, I'm part of the London Metropolitan Elite. I'm born and raised in Richmond. So I grew up, Alex, thinking national elections were fought between the Tories and the Liberal Democrats because it's all yellow around here.
Yeah, well, I know. Well, West is best, isn't it? I'm glad you spent some time out in the West Country, even though Bristol's become dreadfully woke. Starmer, I mean, what on earth was that? I don't think there's anyone in the country who's watched that and gone, oh, that's lovely. Oh, I'm right in the mood for Christmas now. It was the most drably delivered, vacuous, meaningless, tokenistic nonsense I have ever seen. You know, he talks about peace and charity and goodwill, the Christian values, family and community, which is basically nicking the mantra from Reform at the moment. But he then seems to sort of turn it all into, hey, let's get out pots and pans for RNHS again. He can't resist doing the whole sort of socialist realism, Stakhanovites propaganda, can he? I just, you know, why is he not a human?
I don't know, Alex. If I knew that, I'd probably be a therapist. Honestly, it's so soporific, isn't it, to watch that? You've got to feel for him. Honestly, he would make one of those 1950s politicians look animated and up to date. It's quite something watching it. He really struggles. Maybe it's because he's quite a sort of buttoned-up Englishman. Maybe it's because he spent his life as a lawyer rather than actually someone in the thrust of political debate, as it were. Ultimately, I mean, I just watched that, and honestly, I can feel myself snoring like one of those sort of Simpsons characters with the zzz coming out my mouth. Really, I mean, honestly, I'd keep it short, is all I'd say. A 30-second. You could almost do it as a TikTok, 10 seconds rather than all that, because I was just watching that, sort of drifting off to sleep.
I mean, there's some pretty horrible headlines about him today, once again. And I want to talk to you now about this U-turn, or this sort of slight backing down on inheritance tax on farms. And what really stands out to me here is he's had pretty much a year to realise this was a ridiculous policy, but also it's very much exposed that this thing hadn't had an impact assessment. He hadn't spoken to farmers. He hadn't spoken to the National Union of Farmers. They hadn't done their sums, or if they had, they just wanted to ignore the impact. And at the end of the day, this is only going to raise 300 million quid, which is, you know, immaterial, frankly, when it comes to a budget. You couldn't even build a hospital for that. I couldn't even build half a hospital for that. Why didn't he just drop it altogether?
Well, I think that there was a big debate between the Treasury and Number 10 on this. It was reported in the Times today that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are at loggerheads. But overall, I mean, I look at the timing of all of it, and it came, Alex, just 24, 36 hours after those big announcements about the animal welfare reforms. And I think Number 10 thought that this was going to be a big, nice Christmas feel-good story about upgrading sort of animal rights, etc. And actually, it turned out to be a lot of pushback, and there was a sort of war on the countryside narrative developing, because again, people were saying it's great you want to protect chickens, great you want to protect pigs, but what about having the protections for our farmers who might get sort of undercut by the government's trade agenda? And so I think at that point they panicked, and they could see how all roads led back to the original sin, if you will, of the inheritance tax changes last year, hence why they've done this big changes. But as you say, I think this is going to be something that is continually used against them. And this Labour government seems to have a lot of pain for not much gain. You look at the winter fuel, you look at the welfare debacle, you look at the farmers' tax, they go through all these headlines and they don't actually raise much money.
But accusations of two-tierism as well, which were inevitable. You know, if they were talking about animal welfare, standards in husbandry, one would imagine they should also look at probably one of the biggest debates, which is non-stun slaughter. And of course they didn't touch that. Of course they didn't, because that would mean potentially offending or ostracising a different community. And so he was always going to get it in the neck over that. And this is the problem. Everything he does, the British people constantly feel you're not on the side of the Brits, you're on the side of everybody but us. Why on earth did they not anticipate that? Or did they and just not care?
I think there's a number of different reasons, one of which I think if you look at the kind of balance of power within the Labour Party, yes, they won about 40 rural seats last year, but those guys were not in the room. They were new MPs. I think that if you look at where the Labour Party was hollowed out over the last 20 years because of Blair's war on the countryside, It meant they didn't have many MPs in rural seats. They weren't involved in those decisions. But I also think it just comes from the advisors, the people who are the civil servants. A lot of them have a very urban focus. And I think that a lot of them saw these big numbers on paper and thought, wow, 5 million, of course we can go after that. That's something Labour feels comfortable going after. Not realising, of course, what it means is that there's a lot of rural poverty. And actually, when we talk about these farmers, yes, 5 million sounds big on paper, but actually, given the costs involved and the little kind of yield on an annual basis, all of those things were impacting it. So I think it was probably a sin of omission as much as it was sort of a deliberate malice.
Oh, do you know, I honestly am fed up with politicians running a country in order to be re-elected rather than running the country to benefit the country. It's unfortunately the way our politics seems to have gone lately. I want to ask you about this sort of the changes to the lobby briefings taking place. We haven't really talked about it much on this show, but essentially the party are going to completely change the way journalists have access to the government. Is this yet another sort of crumb of evidence that they're pretty tyrannical, or is it actually a sensible manoeuvre to make?
So I think there's some elements in the changes which are sensible. I think that it's right that we sort of move with evolving times. I've never been one of those who's a gatekeeper, and I think that there is certainly a strong case that so-called content creators ought to be brought along as well to some of these briefings. What I would say, Alex, is 2 points, one of which is that it's clearly done much more for the benefit of number 10 than it is the journalists, and thus by extension the press. There's a great letter in the Times today by Sir Tom Kelly, who was the former Prime Minister's spokesman, who said that the afternoon briefing, which is being scrapped as a result of this because there are 2 briefings a day, the afternoon briefing was the one he most feared the most, because often it allowed the journalists to get more answers out of government, and I think that's a good thing overall. The second thing, of course, Alex, is that this isn't a government that came in promising to do this or is doing it at a time of strength. They're doing it at a time of weakness. They've had 18 months to make these changes. They're clearly doing it now because they can see the public mood has turned against them. I don't think it's going to make any impact whatsoever in terms of the headlines, and I don't think it's going to save them against a public which is clearly souring on the Labour government.
What's your visceral reaction to this rather chilling story that, thankfully, what could have been the worst terror attack in British history has managed to be foiled? I mean, I just feel like I remember during the whole sort of post 7/7, we used to get the terror updates, didn't we? You know, we're red light, we're amber light. And and it seems to me now we're in a situation where we don't want to talk about this anymore. We can see repeated terror incidents happening in Germany, in France, in other countries. We know full well we've got a lot of people in this country and we don't know what their intentions are. We don't know who they are. And I keep getting the impression that we've got to a stage where it's like, right, we are in a big mess. There's probably not much we can do about it at this stage. So the best approach is to not talk about it so we don't scare members of the public. But then a story like this pops up and keenly reminds us that a Bondi Beach-style attack is probably a when, not an if.
Yes, and so this is the report that 2 British men were trying to be involved in plotting a kind of replica of Paris 2015 again in the UK, and wanted to do so as a result for the Gaza war. So I think that there's a number of different elements. There's one of which is, of course, I think that we're going to have the ripple effect of a conflict many hundreds, thousands of miles away from us in the Middle East playing out on our shores. We're going to be seeing that happening for many years to come. People will have been radicalised by that. Second of all, I think that will lead to uncomfortable questions, maybe for this government as well, about the role of Islam and Islamism in all of this, and whether enough is being done to stamp that out. And third of all, as you say, Alex, I mean, public patience and all this. You know, I've grown up, I remember going to school under the shadow of 7/7 and, always seeing bags on the tube and thinking, is that going to blow up? My uncle was meant to be on one of those trains that was blown up. I do wonder if we are reaching a kind of tipping point at this, which is where generations have grown up aware of this kind of threat, and they see politicians who, for understandable, very noble reasons often, but have always put potentially community relations at the forefront of their minds, sometimes at the expense of public safety. So I think this is going to be a big question in the future. And tragically, I think that more and more of these cases are going to come to the fore. And sadly, as you can read the quotes in the Telegraph write-up about this, is that Jews are very much at the forefront of this. And I think British Jews are terrified right now. And this shows they have evidence to be so.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that the Labour Party, yes, even people like Wes Streeting could lose his seat to pro-Gaza votes. Jonathan Ashworth lost his seat. There's many seats now that are being made marginal because Muslim voters are now voting for Muslim candidates. I don't think that is going to change. I don't think Labour's going to be able to get those votes back. I mean, the organisation Muslim Vote are going to target, I think, 98 seats next year. They definitely need to be investigated, by the way. But I feel the Labour Party have got a great opportunity in the form of having a Home Secretary who is a Muslim, and she could robustly address these issues of Islamism. She could actually be the voice of the Muslim community, which often we don't get when we learn about terror attacks being foiled, a response to Bondi Beach. And yet they're not doing this. They're not grabbing the nettle. Where is the Labour Party's relationship, do you think, now, with wanting, needing and trying to get the votes from that community? And how might that be hampering their ability to address certain issues? Because look, it's very clear, right? 2026, like 2025, probably the biggest issue facing the West in general, particularly Western Europe, is the Muslim issue. It is the question of Islamism in all forms. And yet it seems to be, despite this being one of the burning issues, the Labour Party is still running away from it. They're not prepared to face it.
Well, I think, first of all, you're right about the political threat. I'm fascinated by those London borough elections next year. You've got Redbridge independents, which very much have been involved in sort of campaigning on Gaza, etc., running against Wes Streeting's Labour Party in that seat. So I'll be fascinated to see. So you're right, there's a political effect here. Second of all, how does the Labour Party respond to it? Well, one of the things they're obviously currently debating is about this Islamophobia definition. Right. Are they going to put that into law? I've heard various accounts by people, top of the government, about whether they want to push ahead with that or not. I think that would have potentially really quite chilling effects for free speech in this country and actually calling out some of this stuff, given we know certain very active groups are sort of policing it. And, you know, I think that's going to be something to watch out for in the new year. But then, I'm not sure they can go back to where they were pre-October 2023. I mean, I do think that people have broken the habit. It's almost like a sort of reverse smoking or something. A lot of these communities have voted Labour for a very long time. They've now broken the habit. They've broken their kind of link with the Labour Party. So I think that although we may laugh at your party, for instance, and I think that at a national level it's clear that the Greens are going to be the dominant kind of new left threat there to the Labour Party, I do think their votes in terms of these Gaza independents are very concentrated across the country. Pockets of Birmingham, pockets of the north, those are going to be the ones to watch. And you're right, if Shabana Mahmood gets the support from her Labour colleagues, I think that she could do quite a lot to neutralise this issue and show the Labour Party can be the party of both kind of traditional Britain and also moderate Muslims as well. But I'm not sure she's going to get the support on the backbenches in pushing through some of the changes that need to be done. But she's very much impressed me this year, I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, this is what, you know, I live in hope that actually, because she is a Muslim Home Secretary, she might be able to tackle what are very sensitive issues head on and are probably the most important issues to voters. And yet everything this Labour Party seems to be doing keeps pulling in the opposite direction. Let's talk about Kemi Badenoch now. She's having a bit of a boost at the moment. I think part of that boost is, you know, artificial. She's definitely being backed with various polls that have been put out, big sit-down interviews, etc. She started off very slowly and shakily as leader of the Conservative Party, and people keep pointing to these, you know, great performances at PMQs. I have a slightly different view of this, if I'm honest. I think that they are, you know, basically you've got a massive open goal with the current government. It's very easy to stand there and berate and deride the things that they're doing in quite a spicy manner. But when I see her stand at that dispatch box, she's reading notes. I still don't feel like I know who she is. I still don't know how she reacts herself. She's always being put in a very controlled environment, either talking about a subject she's really comfortable with, the culture wars, or making a speech from behind a lectern that has been written for her, or sitting and, you know, reading out zinger lines that a Spada's written during PMQs. But she does seem to be having a bit of an uptick in support at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree on that. I think that, look, she's clearly relaxed and got better at PMQs. That is not all the job, but it's certainly an important part in terms of making the most opportunities. She's clearly sort of up to the sort of public engagement. There are elements of the Tory party which are working well. I'd argue that their online content game seems to be working well. They're still getting a decent number of donations, or the Reform have upped their game as well. But the key point, Alex, is really two interesting things, I think. One of which is that it therefore lessens the case for kind of a change of leader if she's clearly doing all she can. And second of all, that leads on to the bigger existential questions about the Conservative Party as an institution. And, you know, I have made this point to members of Kemi Badenoch's team. I say, look, you know, it's great you've got this momentum. What is your narrative going to be when it comes to May and we get to those elections? And if, as the polls are correct, you're only getting 18%. What happens then? And I really haven't heard much of an answer. And so I think May's going to be the big defining thing of this year. It reminds me of the quote by Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think the two main political parties in this country, Labour and the Conservatives, are going to get punched in the face when it comes to the ballot box. Kevin Baynock has clearly, done some good things over the past few months or so. The question is, when it comes to actually revitalising a brand after its worst ever defeat, has she got what it takes? And right now, I think that is still a question that needs to be answered in the course of the next 12 months.
How does her team regard Jenrick? Is he helpful or a hindrance? Because he's a very active little creature, isn't he? Putting out his videos on social media. I thought his one lately on the 400 quangos was utterly brilliant.
Yeah.
And I look at Robert Jenrick and I think if he was leader of the Conservative Party, I think he... Oh, hold on, my mic's become unplugged.
I can hear you now, don't worry.
Oh, no, it's back. It's not unplugged. It's just, some technical glitch with the microphone. It's already gone on its Christmas holidays, that microphone. So Robert Jenrick, he's doing a lot of proactive stuff. He seems tougher and more convicted sometimes than Nigel Farage. He's prepared to push that Overton window even further. I get the impression that Nigel, who's sort of sitting there going, gosh, I might actually end up Prime Minister, so I've got to tread very carefully. He's not as gung-ho, perhaps, as he used to be. What I want to know is whether Badenoch's looking at Jenrick thinking, actually, this is really helpful because it's keeping those burning flames of hardlinism alive in the Conservative Party that people who might otherwise go to Reform could be tempted back to the Tories, or whether she looks at him as a threat and a hindrance.
I think you'll speak to people around her. There's a bit of both in that sense. Particularly when it looked like Kevin Baynock's leadership might be in more peril at the sort of middle of this year. But I would make the point that, it's an interesting what the Conservatives are now saying, which is they're talking about a team. They're really stressing the team element. Their whole thing is to contrast what they see as the one-man band of Nigel Farage versus this whole kind of great shadow cabinet they've got. And so Jenrick is an important part of that. Jenrick clearly has scored victories against David Lammy. The dispatch box clearly going out there and making justice an issue. He's managed to neutralise, I think, one of the Tories' worst areas, which was what they did on the prisons, and actually turn it into an offensive weapon, which is quite a turnaround in sort of 12, 15 months or so. So I think that he is respected by a lot of them. He's clearly got some interesting political economy. He's got a very good team around him. But I think everyone's always a bit wary about sort of, potential pretenders to the crown. But overall, it's working well right now. But the question will come after May and what happens there.
I mean, do you think, because I often wonder what Jenrick will do next, because there are a lot of people thinking, you sound like you should be in Reform. And there isn't any sort of obvious heir apparent to Nigel, who, if he were to become Prime Minister, would be becoming Prime Minister in his sort of mid-60s. So when he finished the term, he'll be pushing 70. And whether Jenrick will sort of hang around and potentially be the bridesmaid at the Conservative Party or the bridesmaid at Reform.
Yes, I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, it's the wider future of the British right, isn't it? I started this year in Canada, where it was the election between Poilievre and Carney. And, of course, over there, it took them many, many cycles. It took them, I think, 3 elections to form the Progressive Conservatives, and the Reform Party became the Conservative Party of Canada. So it took them about 14 years. Clearly, we are now on a much accelerated timeline in this country in a modern age. I don't know, but he will definitely, I think, play a future whatever comes over the next 2-3 years or so. He, of course, publicly is saying that he's very much sticking with the Conservatives. I would make the point as well that some people, not least his campaign manager, Danny Kruger, clearly think that the party is done as an institution and now gone over to Reform. So I think this is one which is, I wish I could sit here and give you the answer, but I think he's definitely going to be one to watch in the events of the next
Hey,
week.
I didn't know Kruger used to be Jenrick's campaign manager.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Oh, that
So this is why it was
changes
really-
things.
Yeah, I mean, I made this point at the press conference when Danny defected. I stood up and said, look, I mean, the fact that you've gone, doesn't that show that Jenrick hasn't got a chance? And he sort of brushed it aside. And, but I think that's an interesting point. And I think that other people, of course, have come across as well to Reform from Jenrick's campaign last year.
Very interesting. That could be a big narrative going forward. James, it's always wonderful catching up with you. I hope you have a really gorgeous
Thanks,
Christmas.
Alex. You too.
Right, let's take a break now. But when I come back, I want to hear from you. I'm going to read some of your messages and hopefully take some calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp 87222 if you're going to text. Write talk before you text. I'm back after this.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, let's read some of your messages. Jonathan in Upminster said, apart from all the other adjectives he used to describe Starmer's Xmas speech, how about dripping with insincerity, obviously coached and rehearsed to within an inch of its life, sick-making and yawn-inducing? He can make a bucket of cold vomit look and sound joyful. Well, don't hold back. Why does Starmer always sound like he's reading poetry when sending a message? Awful, says someone. Does he sound like he's reading poetry? Is that what that sounds like to you? Blimmin' heck, if that's what poetry sounds like, you've been reading all the wrong verses. Fern in Glasgow says, when Brits migrate, they spend the money they earn in that country's economy, boosting it. The migrants coming here all cram into multiple occupancy accommodation and send most of benefits and earnings back to other countries, boosting the economy of other countries. It's like foreign aid 2.0. You're right, there is a huge transit of wealth. We've seen this actually, the Somali community in America, haven't we? The welfare payments being siphoned off and sent back to the home country. Dan from Kent says, after Sebastian has finished with that spare room, maybe he should talk with the family into taking in a migrant or two. I always do think all of these, refugees welcome. Go on then, put up and shut up. Mark in Croydon says, same old, same old. This issue began years ago when the English are allowed to have benefits, meaning they refuse to do some jobs illegal immigrants do. We don't need thousands of illegals in the UK in low-paid, low-skilled jobs draining the economy. This is it. When people say, well, we need these people to... I'm like, have you seen how many people aren't working? I think we've just got to get real, haven't we? And Jane says, Alex, that monologue was mind-blowing. Is that my sort of Christmas ad-lib? Why, thank you. What really annoys me is why on earth have know-alls changed BC to BCE, before Christ, to before Common Era? What's that all about? No, I know. It's always BC for me, I'm afraid. And Darren in South Wales says, I'm a fan of yours and I know you believe what you say, but I'm an atheist. Well, there you go. Good on you. So we have to disagree. At least you don't think I should be killed for being a non-believer. However, if you believe in the scriptures, how can you say that God is not a vengeful God? Are you not familiar with the Noah's Ark story? Everyone but 8 humans. That I did talk about the second covenant. Right? That's, what you've got to understand is the Old Testament stands, but what happens is God comes down incarnate and goes, right, this is how we're doing things now, and the message of peace and goodwill. So there you go. As an atheist, I don't necessarily expect you to go home and read the Bible, but it's a great yarn, I'll tell you that much. Hi, Alex, the only Christmas message I want to hear is the monarchs, says Stephen. Well, I don't know, you might change your mind when you do hear it. And Nigel Evans and those of his ilk have forgotten already what the Tories, including Badenoch, did to this country, allowing in Labour. The Tories have allegedly reformed. Really? They can't be trusted. And if you look behind the facade, they are still there lurking to destroy the country again. Shall we do some calls now and speak to Paul, who's in Hartlepool? Hi there, Paul.
Hello, Alex. I was just wondering, when you were listening to Keir Starmer's Christmas speech, I know you're feeling under the weather, but was he putting you to sleep?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it was, actually. My eyelids suddenly became very heavy. He would actually be quite good, sort of, a little bit of sort of white noise behind him, reading the shipping forecast. That would be brilliant. That could solve a lot of the mental health crisis because people wouldn't be awake to feel so sad.
Yeah. Do you think he should have there should be a warning on before he makes his speech that you shouldn't be driving or using any heavy equipment while listening to this speech?
Do you know, actually, it probably should come with more than just those health warnings, quite frankly.
I mean, it's like the kids in a playground. You know what I mean? You'd all be nice now.
Oh, it was just vacuous nonsense, wasn't it? I mean, I just want someone who talks to us like they're a human. They say what they think. They're not afraid to have their own beliefs and ideologies and convictions, who present them to us honestly and let us make up our minds. Instead, what we get is this sort of beige dross that means nothing to nobody. I don't know why they even bother, quite frankly.
When he's talking about the NHS and what have you, yeah, we all love the NHS and what have you, but when the COVID was on, the people that were on the front line were the shopkeepers and the shop assistants. When's he ever mentioned them? He's never ever mentioned those people that were out there, kids.
Well, he only likes people if they work in public service, you know, who are taxpayer funded, who are part of the state, because he loves the state, doesn't he? When it comes to the private sector, the actual workers who put money into the economy, he just wants us to sort of put more and more money into his pet projects.
He's just, I think with him being a barrister in his time, he's, when he defends things, right? He defends it as a barrister and saying that as if to say, "Oh, there's nothing to see here," and that's why everybody falls asleep when he talks a hell of a lot but doesn't say nothing.
I know. Well, that's what I mean. It's just vacuous platitudes, isn't it? But we get a lot of that in politics. Like, I want some personality back in politics. I quite like Donald Trump because at least you kind of know where he's at. He doesn't care what people think. He just says what he means.
He has his bad situation, but there's a hell of a lot of good Donald Trump's doing at the moment.
Well, I just miss character and conviction. I don't want one of these sort of many pianoforte leg, carbon copy non-entity bots running the country. I wouldn't mind having someone, even if they're a bit spicy. This is the problem with politics. We've gone really puritanical. Oh, is he like this? Did he say nasty things in the I don't care. I don't care whether someone's particularly likeable as long as they do the blimmin' job well. Quite frankly, if you're going to lead a country and be an effective leader, the likelihood is you probably got quite a few sort of sharp edges rather than just being some sort of mass of nothingness. Paul, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's do a few more messages before we take a break. Brad in Cambridge says, Starmer really does need to request his money back from his voice coach. I wonder if she'll be visiting him again today. Hi, Alex. Merry Christmas. Thank you, Derek. We are dealing with the migrant problem in the wrong way. The lefties that hate the British way of life and our culture, values and history, these are the people we need to tell we no longer want here. People like Zach Polanski need to be told, swear allegiance to the British way of life or you'll have to pay a non-British tax or leave the country. I quite like that, putting a tax on people who don't sign up to our values. Ian says Bobby Jenrick has that unmistakable aura of a future Prime Minister. Does he? I mean, I quite like our Bob, but I don't see him as Prime Minister, but I do think he'd be quite effective in an office of state. If Kemi was to come out with exactly the same politics as Farage, I still won't vote for her, because if she got to power, she'd be removed by One Nation Tories. They have past form. Farage for PM, says George of Croydon. That is the thing. The Conservative Party, whatever Kemi says and does, the Conservative Party is still a divided party ideologically. There's still a lot of soft remainers in their midst. Joanna from Salisbury says, cringe, Starmer. Christian values from a non-believer of anything. Can that man lay straight in bed? He speaks with such a forked tongue. Well, there we go. Mike in Lincoln says, much as I love to hear from the great Nigel Evans, I have to disagree with him on Kemi Badenoch. I have been back and examined her voting record on the matters we most care about. And despite her rhetoric at the time, she generally voted in line with the One Nation, Lib Dem and Labour fifth column portion of the Tory party. I don't think she can be trusted. Well done for your research there. Right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'm going to be speaking to a beef farmer about this sort of correction to the farm inheritance tax.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. I live in fear because the 1:30 train to the West Country has been cancelled. The 3:30 train to the West Country has been cancelled. So that means every man, woman and child who wants on Christmas Eve to get back to the West Country is going to be on the 2:30 train. Oh my gosh, that's going to be hell on earth. It's a busy train at the best of times, but I'm feeling really sickly. I'm definitely not going to be getting a seat. Might not even be... Whoa! I just broke something under my desk. What's going on here? Sorry about that, folks. Oh, well. Tech Up, you might have to come in after the next advert break and start hammering things back together. Some sort of weird trapdoors opened up under the out of vision down here. Oh, it's all going swimmingly well, isn't it? Right, let's move on to the next topic, shall we? Because we're joined now by Matt Cullen, who is a beef farmer, fourth generation beef farmer, in fact, based just outside of Canterbury. Matt, is it good news for you and your family that this correction has been made to inheritance tax on farms, increasing the threshold?
Yeah, good morning, or afternoon actually now. Yeah, good afternoon. Yes, it has. It's fantastic news for all the small, really small family farms across the UK. The news of yesterday, and yes, it does. It's helped us as our family farm. We won't be affected now. We would have been without the threshold being moved, but now it's been moved and we're not. But look, this isn't by any means a full U-turn. You know, it is helped, and it's a real great step in the right direction for all the small family farms, but it still means that all the medium-sized farms are still going to be hit and affected as well. So we mustn't lose sight of that.
Why on earth? I mean, I get the impression this seemingly has changed after a meeting with the head of the NUF 10 days ago, who said, look, you've got to understand the human impact of this very ill-devised policy. Why on earth does it appear that there wasn't any consultation, no impact assessment? They didn't listen for the best part of a year when people were saying, what on earth are you doing?
Well, we've said this all the way along. This all comes back to Whitehall, and it comes back to the civil servants think that they know best. And unfortunately, not one of those civil servants that come up with these policies for whichever government are in at the time party to take forward, none of those have worked on a farm, never set foot on a farm. And they don't get what the businesses and small family farms actually do, providing food, the amount of money that we put into our local economies up and down the country. They don't get it. They just physically don't get it. They are stuck in their four walls in Whitehall, and whatever policies they want to come up with, that's what they are set on doing, and letting the government at the time drive it. And it was a terrible, terrible policy to come up with. And we banged on their doors, and I've been one that's organised a couple of the main tractor protests in London. And, you know, we kept saying we need consultation, sit down and talk. And you've seen all the videos of when lots of ministers, and obviously only a couple of weeks ago, a week ago, the Prime Minister was at a select committee and he was sticking to his gun. No, it's not going to affect. These are the right, correct figures. And now look what's happened.
Well, it's proved they're either useless or willful when it comes to their approach to agriculture. When you look at what's going on to beef and dairy farmers in Europe, does it concern you? Because there have been huge protests taking place. Because in certain EU countries, those who rear cattle are being told to essentially get rid of their cattle because they fart too much, save the environment and all the rest of it. While at the same time, the EU are going to try and strike up a big trade deal with Mercosur, which are the South American group of nations, which would potentially lead to importations of cheaper beef, despite the fact, of course, they're chopping down the Amazon rainforests to allow their cattle to graze. When you look at some of the noises coming out of the Labour Party, such as Wes Streeting, talking about getting back into things like a customs union, are you speaking to sort of, you know, other beef and cattle, beef and dairy farmers across the channel about what's affecting them, and does that worry you?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some friends in France that farm, and they are really worried. I mean, this was always going to be the same. Well, when the trade deals were being done with America, with Trump, we, as beef and dairy, particularly beef, we were really worried, and we're still worried about what actually plays out in the true trade deals, because what it does, governments think that these trade deals are a marvellous thing, but what it does, it absolutely destroys all British produce, because you just open the gates for cheap food that can be produced in mass grand scale than what we can do here in the UK. And let's not forget, the UK has the highest welfare in this entire world in looking after animals and producing food to the highest standards across the globe. And other countries don't. And as you just said about South America, it doesn't. They're massive, great big industrial units producing food to scales that we never see in this country. And the problem is the same as our European friends. It just undermines. And I've just to sort of step back a bit. I mean, at this moment, all the supermarkets, you go looking at all the veg, they're selling veg at 50p, 5p, 20p for a bag of potatoes. All it's doing is undermining the farmer, but what they're doing is selling it at a loss, but then they're clobbering you on the luxury items, your chocolates, your fancy foods that you want, and putting a great big, your Coca-Cola drinks, all those great big prices on it. And the trouble is, we've got into a real kilter where we don't value the true value of what proper food should be valued at. And, we farmers go out, we're not doing it, we do it as a way of life. We're a business that only makes a 1% return, and there aren't any other businesses that make a 1% return. So every little penny counts. And when you see supermarkets doing what they're doing, you've got Europe wanting to do big sign-ups with big South American food companies to come in and supply parts of Europe. You see why the French, the Germans and all of that are up in arms. And the same as we are here, because we wipe out the small family farms, and it's still going to wipe out some of the middle family farms that are going to go, because that's still going to affect them. They don't come back. And that's the thing. The cost in investment now is so great in farming. You can't just go to your local machinery dealer and go, well, I want X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to start farming, because the costs are so horrendous. That's why it's always been hand-me-down inheritance from the family before. We pass it to the next generation, and we keep improving the farms as the years go forward to make sure that we're farming efficiently in the best way and the best methods that we can do.
How much do you are you under the cosh for all the net zero targets? Because Starmer is going to be pushing Britain into stricter net zero targets with a tie-up with the EU. Certainly the EU is sort of pointing at cattle rearing as a contributor to CO2 methane emissions. How much do you get it in the neck already with stuff like you've got to rewild fields, or you've got to give your cattle some sort of Bovaer or whatever it's called to stop them guffing?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm a beef farmer. Mine are grass grazed out. They're housed in the winter because our fields can't take the grazing through the winter. The ground's too hard and makes a mess out there, and we'd have nothing for the summer. But look, I'm not into the net zero thing, because I mean, the things that you want to stop are the planes flying above me, and I'm where I am in Kent, I'm in a straight fly path to Europe. They're flying over in their hundreds. You've got big tankers and ships going around the world. They're not governed by any emissions. So until we start crackdowning on them, don't come knocking at the farm. And at the end of the day, when you look at the whole net zero gain and what farmers contribute, it's very little to the rest of all the climate and how food gets around. You look at how food gets around, it's by lorry, it's by van, all the ones you get, I'm not going to go down the route, but the vegans, and you look at all the avocados and all the nuts they're all flown in.
Yeah.
You know, but no one talks about that.
That's very true, actually. And like you said, we have some of the highest welfare standards when it comes to our husbandry. I must admit to you, Matt, I am not a beef eater myself. I stopped eating beef after living in India because I really love cows. I'd love to come and hang out on your farm and play with all your...
You're more than welcome, Alex, to come down.
Yeah, but then I know what's going to happen to them at the end of the day, and it would break my heart. But it's good to know that your lovely mooers are sort of eating, farting and living happily. So thank you ever so much for joining me today, Matt Cullen. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, we are going to be digging into this tie-up with the EU's net zero targets. I think it's very portentous. I do not think this is good news. I think it's going to become a very big story in 2026. And then at the same time, we're going to be looking at the fact that Norway, of course not in the EU, are doing things entirely differently, going out and drilling, and they've just struck the black gold, haven't they? Right in the corner from where we could be doing the same. We're discussing that after this.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now let's welcome aboard HMS Common Sense, James Woodhousen, who's a journalist and social commentator. Happy Christmas, James. How are you doing?
Happy Christmas. Very well.
Well, I hope you enjoy your Christmas, because I have a feeling this is going to be a bit of a big news story next year. It was snuck out at the same time as it was revealed that we're paying money to go back into the Erasmus scheme, which is utterly ludicrous, because the Erasmus scheme just benefits EU students who want to come and have us basically pay their tuition fees to study here, whereas the scheme we already had, the Turing scheme, gave British students the opportunity to go and study at universities not just in the EU, but in lots of different places. But at the same time, it was suggested that we would end up getting back into the EU's electricity agreement. But as all things with the EU, it isn't as simple as, oh, well, you know, if we are generating more power than you, we'll send it to you. And if you generate more power than us, you can send it to us. You know, that sort of common energy market, which on some level makes sense. We already have sort of interconnecting cables with France and a similar situation. No, this comes with stricter net zero targets. We're already being hit by Mad Ed's zealotry when it comes to net zero. And it seems to me that if we go down this route, we're going to have to double. We've currently got 22% ambition of all our energy coming from renewables by 2030. That would have to double to 45% by 2030, which is only 4 years away. That's going to have a huge impact if this goes ahead, isn't it?
Well, it's not going to go ahead. There's no chance of Ed reaching his original targets by 2030. Nearly everybody in the energy industry agrees on that. And these are not, I should say, Alex, climate denialists. It's just a fact of life. You can't do it. The EU ones are even more ridiculous.
Yeah.
And but I think there's one thing I'd like to take you up on in a friendly fashion, which is, I understand the vernacular. In fact, I agree with it. Mad Ed. I think from his point of view, and from, the Labour Party and government's point of view, there's nothing mad about what they're doing. They see a new world, Alex, which is global, despite all the wars that are brewing. They see an EU which is like coming to mummy. We could discuss the Freudian aspects of that, but exactly at the moment when the EU's in a lot of trouble, not just for migration, but if you talk about the EU's energy market, it's not at all what a national market would be. The exchanges that go on, there are more exchanges, but it's nothing like a national grid, and the decarbonisation of the key German market in particular. If you read a pamphlet I did called Lights Out, I didn't write the title, it's a little bit alarmist, but it's the direction of travel. And if you can spell my name, which is very difficult, but you've got it right, you'll find that German commentators said that when Germany last really dashed for the decarbonisation, it was really the beginning of the deindustrialisation of Germany. And your nice farmer who just I watched, right? What we're seeing here is Mad Ed, isn't he? He wants to be part of that, just like Keir Starmer said he preferred Davos to Westminster. Old Ed wants to walk tall in the global circuits, and that means that you and I and farmers have to pay higher prices because we're all energy wastrels, we're all so backdated and so last century, and it's undemocratic because we've got no say. People who actually know about farming and energy are struck to these ridiculous targets. The target mentality, as I'm sure you and your viewers know, really begins with Stalin in the 30s. Now, I don't believe Ed Miliband's a Marxist. I don't think the government's a Marxist. Poor old Karl Marx would be turning in his grave at some of the things they did. Higher taxes on everything, more inflationary food and all the rest of it. It's terrible. But if you take it on its own terms, the analysts have said, it's in the Telegraph pieces, and well done, Jonathan Leake, for finding this document. They'll only make their targets by installing more heat pumps faster and more electric vehicles fast. And the only problem with that is that between May 2022 and February 2025, 47,000 vouchers for heat pumps were redeemed. 47,000 out of a household. You're not yawning, I trust. It is the stats, but it's out of 25 million households.
The thing is, they approach the net zero agenda with such religiosity that pragmatism goes out of the window, and it is excruciating when we look at our reliance on the foreign importation of liquefied natural gas. And we have to get that in previous years. We've had to get emergency supplies from Qatar, but largely we have been importing from Norway. And then to find out that Norway has struck oil in the North Sea right by our own waters, the same waters that Ed Miliband has turned around and said there can be no exploratory drilling, the same waters where he's actually concreting in our oil wells. And you look at this and it's painful because we're going to be basically buying that oil anyway when we could be extracting it ourselves, potentially as well exporting it ourselves. It makes no sense.
Well, it does make no sense, and that's why it's easy just to say he's mad, but then he's living in such distance from you and me, let alone farmers, You can't put in a heat pump in a hurry in a council house or a council tower block, you know, and they're not going anywhere. They're backing more EVs at just the moment when Ford in America has written off $19 billion, saying that EVs in America won't be 10% of the market, they'll be 5%. You know, the whole industry is in a muddle about what to do about EVs. But to go to your Norway point, a very simple thing. What are EVs made of? Well, they're made of an electric battery, right? But there's a little thing in there called textiles and some plastic and some rubber and, you know, all sorts of other things. Where do they come from? The oil industry. You know, the electric car is still a petrochemical car, just like the medicines and the equipment in the NHS come from oil. Where else are they going to come from?
Right. Oh,
So,
they all grow on trees, James. Of course
Yeah,
they
well,
do. They're sort of, you know, divinely provenanced, no doubt. But I mean, what my big concern about this, tying us into EU targets, concreting over our oil wells, not doing the exploratory drilling, is even if we suddenly get a pragmatic government in who realise that even if you did want to transition to renewables, perhaps the best way of doing it is pain-freely as possible, is to actually use what you have at your fingertips, even if it is fossil fuels, is actually these things become incredibly hard to reverse quickly, don't they?
Yes, I mean, you know, it is wanton damage to fill in stuff you don't agree with, right? And I think that, you know, that really shows the mentality that we're headed for in 2026. And I think your farmer friend, you know, began to talk about this, which is, you know, it's not just a question of higher bills, Alex, right? It's a question of the elite being so removed from normal people that they can take wanton acts of damage. I mean, it's like Just Stop Oil throwing paint at, you know, masterpieces, right? That Miliband mentality is the same as that.
I mean, look, what is staggering here, what is staggering is Norway has drilled about 45 exploratory wells this year alone, with 12 yielding commercial quantities of oil and gas. We've banned the exploration entirely. Those things take a lot of time. We've destroyed, like you said, sabotaged the energy supplies we've already got. That is normally what a hostile state does. When you look at the reporting coming out of Russia and Ukraine, they're both hitting each other's energy supplies because that's how you weaken a country. That's how you decimate its economy. That's how you put it on the back foot. And it's not only about how much this is going to cost the taxpayer. I genuinely worry, especially following that report from, is it NISA, the electricity grid, that we could be facing blackouts.
Yeah, well, that's all very possible. You know, we mustn't lose the anti-democratic dimension of this, right? The venom which will attach to anybody saying, look, heat pumps, they got a lot of steel in them. Have we got green steel furnaces yet? No. Are they coming fast? And will they be inexpensive? No. We need fossil fuels, gas, to make steel, to make heat pumps. Not that anybody's buying heat pumps, even with a subsidy.
Yeah.
So, you know, the flouting of the national will, it's the same with the balance of payments, Alex. You fill in the wells and then you say, Norway, could you sell us some? Or
It's
EU,
crazy.
could you sell us some?
It's madness. It's akin to mental illness. James, thank you ever so much. Brilliant explanations there. Well, you're taking your precautions, aren't you, Mr. Dubois?
Didn't need them for COVID, Alex, but listening to you when you came on air at 10 o'clock, I thought, you know, this is going to warm your heart to see.
Are you
this.
about to sort of
Here you
nuke
go.
me with that thing? We could have some sort of fight, couldn't we,
We
across
could
the
actually.
desk? Like,
We
see
could.
who's got the longest reach with their sanitizer.
There you go. God, that was horrible. How did people do that?
I
for
do you know,
so
I
long?
didn't during COVID.
That
I
was
couldn't wear
really,
the damn
really
things.
horrible.
Awful. So you've
But-
managed to evade the lurking.
Well, I've got to say you did really well. In fact, I think you've cured however you feel because your voice sounds perfect at the
Do you
end.
know what is interesting is you always wake up with the big old croak, don't you?
Yeah.
And when I was having my makeup done, I was nodding off. My eyes wouldn't stay open, and I was just like, oh, you know, while you're brushing my hair, I'm just going to have to take an emergency power nap. And I've been doing it during my advert break, sort of sitting there like, just trying to get like even a few seconds of extra energy.
By the way, that was all on air. We took a little.
Oh, was
you know.
it? Oh, great. That's going to be in the bloopers, is it? But when you do this job, the adrenaline gets you
just kicks
through.
in.
The problem is you come out the other side and you crash. And I've just learnt my 1:30 train to the West Country is cancelled. The 3:30 is cancelled, which means the 2:30 if it isn't cancelled, is going to be living
Where
hell.
is Simon Calder when you need him?
Oh, yeah, he was on yesterday. He said the trains at like